The Duke was coming for her. Not the debutantes, not the widows draped in French lace. Her, Elena Whitford, 43, unmarried, and according to every drawing room in England, utterly invisible. She stood at the window of Whitford Manor, watching the carriage roll up the gravel drive, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself in 20 years. Fear. Not of him. Of what he might make her want. They said Adrian Blackthorne destroyed everything he touched. They said he was ruthless, cold, impossible to predict. What they didn't say, what terrified her more, was that he never, ever miscalculated. And he was here for her. Stay with me. Watch how a woman the world discarded becomes the one thing a powerful man cannot ignore. Hit like, drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. Elena had learned long ago that survival required invisibility. Not the kind women achieved through meekness or silence. Those were performances, easily detected and swiftly punished. No, true invisibility demanded precision. You had to be present enough to avoid suspicion, useful enough to remain necessary, but never so visible that anyone bothered to look closely. She had mastered it by 30, perfected it by 40. The morning Duke Blackthorne's letter arrived, she was in the estate library, ledgers spread across the mahogany desk like battle maps. Numbers didn't lie, didn't judge, didn't promise things they couldn't deliver. The Whitford holdings, what remained of them after her father's catastrophic investments and her brother's subsequent gambling debts, survived because she understood crop rotations, tenant negotiations, and compound interest better than most men half her age. Miss Elena. Mrs. Cathcart stood in the doorway, silver tray extended, her expression carefully neutral. The housekeeper had been at Whitford Manor since before Elena was born. She'd watched Elena transform from a bright-eyed girl who believed in fairy tales to this, whatever this was. A letter, miss, from His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorne. Elena's pen didn't waver. She finished the calculation, 14 pounds, 6 shillings per quarter acre, before looking up. Leave it on the side table. He's requested permission to call, tomorrow afternoon. Now the pen stopped. Adrian Blackthorne didn't call on people. He summoned them, dismissed them, occasionally destroyed them. The Duke of Blackthorne was a gravitational force in English society, titled obscenely wealthy, and according to reliable gossip, completely devoid of human warmth. His first wife had died in childbirth 15 years ago. He'd never remarried, showed no interest in doing so. Men like that didn't request audiences with women like Elena. Did the letter specify why? Mrs. Cathcart's mouth twitched, the closest she came to showing emotion. No, miss. Then send our regrets. I'm not receiving. Miss Elena, we have 17 tenants behind on rent. The south field needs replanting, and someone's been poaching in the east wood again. I don't have time for aristocratic curiosities. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't entirely the truth either. The truth was that 23 years ago, Elena had been 20. Beautiful, if the portraits could be believed. Full of the kind of stupid hope that made girls do catastrophically foolish things. Like falling in love with a charming second son who whispered poetry and promises, right up until the moment his father arranged a better match. She'd learned then, hope was expensive, visibility was dangerous, safety lay in being overlooked. Very well, miss, Mrs. Cathcart retreated, disapproval radiating from her rigid shoulders. Elena returned to the ledgers. The numbers welcomed her back without judgment. Adrian Blackthorne arrived anyway. Not the next afternoon, as requested. That very evening, just as Elena finished reviewing the household accounts and was contemplating whether whiskey counted as dinner. She heard the commotion from her study. Horses, voices, Mrs. Cathcart's scandalized squawk. By the time she reached the entrance hall, he was already inside. Tall. That was her first coherent thought. Unnecessarily tall, as if regular human proportions didn't apply to dukes. Dark hair going silver at the temples. The kind of face that painters probably fought over, all sharp angles and cold assessment. He wore his evening clothes like armor. His eyes found her immediately. Gray. Observant. Entirely too intelligent. Miss Whitford. His voice matched his appearance. Precise, controlled, expensive. Forgive the intrusion. He didn't sound remotely apologetic. Elena descended the stairs slowly, buying time. Proper etiquette demanded she be flustered, perhaps frightened, definitely deferential. But she'd stopped performing those particular scripts years ago. Your Grace, I believe my housekeeper conveyed my regrets. She did. He watched her approach with the focus of a man studying a chessboard. I came anyway. How ducal of you. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite amusement. Interest, maybe. I prefer efficient. We need to speak. I assumed you'd prefer privacy to a public venue. That's a rather large assumption, considering you don't know me at all. Don't I? The question landed like a blade. Elena stopped 3 steps from the bottom of the staircase, suddenly aware that the height advantage was deliberate. He'd positioned himself where she couldn't help but look down at him. A subtle inversion of power dynamics. Clever. Also infuriating. Mrs. Cathcart, tea in the drawing room. His Grace won't be staying long. She swept past him without waiting for agreement, heard his footsteps follow. The drawing room was her least favorite space in the house. Too many memories of her mother's salon days before the money ran out and the invitations stopped coming. But it was formal, neutral territory. He didn't sit when she gestured to the chairs. Instead, he walked to the window overlooking the gardens, hands clasped behind his back. Military posture. She filed that detail away. Your estate is smaller than I expected. Direct. No polite preamble about the weather or her health. Elena found herself oddly relieved. My father had expensive tastes and poor judgment. I've spent the last decade preventing complete collapse. Was there something specific you wanted, Your Grace, or did you come to inventory my failures? He turned. The lamplight caught his face differently now, less austere, more tired, though he hid it well. I want to hire you. Of all the things she'd braced herself for, that wasn't among them. I beg your pardon? My holdings. He moved away from the window, closer. Not threatening, but deliberate. 17 estates across England and Scotland. Investment portfolios in 3 countries. A shipping concern, 2 textile mills. Various parliamentary interests. My solicitors manage the legal aspects. My man of business handles daily operations. But the actual strategy, the connections between all of it, that requires someone who understands systems, complex systems. Elena sat down because standing suddenly seemed inefficient. You have an entire staff for that. I have ambitious men who want to impress me and terrified men who won't tell me the truth. What I need is someone with no personal stake, in my opinion, and enough intelligence to see what others miss. And you think that's me? I know it is. He pulled a paper from his jacket, unfolded it. Her own handwriting stared back at her. A letter she'd written to the County Agricultural Committee 6 months ago, proposing crop rotation reforms. This is brilliant, practical, thoroughly researched, and completely ignored because you're a woman suggesting men might be farming incorrectly. Heat crawled up her neck. Not embarrassment, anger. You investigated me. I investigate everyone I do business with. Your brother gambled away most of your inheritance. You salvaged what remained through strategic tenant placement, modernized irrigation, and converting 2 failing fields into a profitable sheep operation. You've increased Whitford's annual yield by 40% in 5 years. Alone. With no capital, no support, and active opposition from your brother until he drank himself to death last year. The casual mention of Thomas's death should have stung. It didn't. She'd buried her brother with relief, not grief. So you want to hire the desperate spinster because she's cheap and clever. How practical. His mouth thinned. I want to hire you because you're the best strategic mind I've encountered in a decade, and I'm tired of pretending mediocre men are my only option. Mrs. Cathcart entered with tea. Set it down. Vanished like smoke, though Elena suspected she'd pressed her ear to the door the moment it closed. Elena poured automatically, buying time to think. This was unexpected, potentially lucrative, definitely dangerous, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. What would this position entail? Consulting. Initially 3 days a week at Blackthorn House in London. You'd review reports, attend strategy meetings, provide analysis. If it works, we'd expand the arrangement. And compensation? He named a figure that made her hand freeze mid-pour. That's absurd. That's what you're worth. Probably more, but I'm hoping you won't negotiate upward on our first meeting. She finished pouring, handed him a cup he didn't want and wouldn't drink. The ritual steadied her. Why me? Specifically, there are men with similar experience who would expect titles, public credit, and constant validation. You've been doing this work in shadows for years because it needed doing. I don't need someone who wants glory. I need someone who wants the work done right. It was a good answer. Too good. She didn't trust it. And if I refuse? He set the untouched teacup down. Then I'll respect your decision and leave, but you won't refuse. The arrogance should have irritated her. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to curiosity. You seem very certain. You haven't asked the most important question yet. Elena waited. You haven't asked why I'm here personally instead of sending my secretary with an offer letter. Why I came at night instead of through proper channels. Why I'm willing to pay you triple what I'd pay a man with comparable experience. Her chest tightened. Why then? He stepped closer. Not invasive, but close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. This wasn't the height advantage she'd had on the stairs. This was something else entirely. Because in 6 weeks, I'm hosting the season's largest gathering at Blackthorn House. Every important family in England will attend, and I intend to announce my intention to court you publicly. The room tilted. You... what? I'm 47, Miss Whitford. My advisors have spent years parading potential duchesses through my drawing room. 18-year-old girls who giggle, widows who calculate my net worth during dinner, women who want the title, the money, the status. Not one has ever asked me an intelligent question. So you want me because I'm convenient? Novel? His expression hardened. I want you because you're extraordinary, and I'm done settling for less. The consulting position is real. The compensation is real. Take it or leave it. But the courtship will happen regardless. You can't just decide that unilaterally. I can. I have. He moved toward the door, then paused. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, I'll assume your answer is no and adjust accordingly. Good evening, Miss Whitford. He was gone before she could formulate a response. Elena sat in the too formal drawing room, surrounded by faded wallpaper and furniture that predated her birth, and tried to remember how to breathe. A duke. Courting her, publicly. It was insane. Impossible. A joke, probably, though his expression had suggested he didn't know how to joke. She walked to the window where he'd stood earlier. The gardens looked different in moonlight, less neglected, more mysterious, like they were holding secrets of their own. 23 years ago, she'd believed a man who promised impossible things. He'd destroyed her for it. Adrian Blackthorn wasn't promising. He was stating intentions like military objectives. Somehow, that was infinitely more terrifying. She didn't sleep. By dawn, she'd compiled a list of 17 reasons to refuse, 12 reasons he might be lying, and 3 reasons this could be a trap designed to humiliate her publicly. The math didn't work in his favor. By mid-morning, she'd reviewed the Whitford accounts again. The Southfield needed replanting. The tenant cottages needed repairs. She had enough reserves for 6 months, maybe 8 if she cut household expenses further. His offer would solve all of it, immediately. That alone should have made her refuse. Mrs. Cathcart found her in the library at noon, staring at her agricultural committee letter, the one he'd somehow acquired. You should accept. Elena looked up. Her housekeeper never offered unsolicited opinions on personal matters. I should absolutely not accept. It's improper, unexpected, and probably some kind of aristocratic power play I don't understand. You've been invisible for 20 years, miss. Mrs. Cathcart's voice was gentler than Elena had heard in decades. Maybe it's time someone actually saw you. Being seen didn't work out well the last time. You were 20. You're not 20 anymore. No, she was 43. Too old for fairy tales. Too experienced for hope. Too smart to believe that powerful men wanted anything other than possession. But, and this was the part that kept her awake, he hadn't tried to possess her. He'd offered employment, partnership. He'd researched her work, not her bloodline or her potential heirs. What if he actually meant it? The thought was more dangerous than any of his words. She sent her acceptance at 3 o'clock. Brief, professional, no acknowledgement of his courtship declaration. If he wanted to court her publicly, he could do it while she did actual work for actual compensation. His response arrived an hour later. A contract, already drawn up, terms exactly as discussed. And a second note, in his own handwriting. The carriage will collect you Monday morning, 6 o'clock. Bring whatever you need for 3 days in London. And Miss Whitford, thank you for being predictable. It's the first time in years anyone has surprised me by doing exactly what I expected. Elena read it 3 times, searching for condescension, found something closer to relief. She was making a catastrophic mistake. She was certain of it. She packed anyway. Ma'am, the carriage arrived precisely at 6. Expensive, well-sprung, the kind that announced its owner's wealth without vulgarity. The driver handed her up without comment, as if collecting unmarried women at dawn was perfectly ordinary. London was 3 hours away. Elena spent them trying to prepare for whatever this was. Failed spectacularly. Blackthorn House occupied an entire city block in Mayfair, the kind of address that required no number. Everyone just knew. The building was Georgian, perfectly proportioned, radiating the quiet power of old money that didn't need to prove anything. The butler, silver-haired, impeccably trained, greeted her as if she were expected royalty. Miss Whitford, His Grace is in the strategy room. I'll show you directly. No tour, no polite delay. She appreciated the efficiency even as it unnerved her. The strategy room was on the 3rd floor, facing south for optimal light. Maps covered one wall. The other held bookshelves organized by, she squinted, geographic region. A massive table dominated the center, currently buried under reports, ledgers, and what looked like shipping manifests. Adrian stood at the window reading something. He'd discarded his jacket, worked in shirt sleeves like a clerk, not a duke. He looked up when she entered. Something in his expression eased. You came. You pay exceptionally well. I'm practical, not proud. A smile ghosted across his mouth. Liar. You're both. Coffee? Please. He poured from a silver service she suspected cost more than her annual household budget. Handed her a cup prepared exactly as she took it. No sugar, splash of cream. She hadn't told him that. You investigated my coffee preferences? Your housekeeper mentioned it. I pay attention. It should have been creepy. Instead, it felt considered, like he'd actually thought about making this easier. So, she set down the cup. Where do we start? His smile became real. The Scottish holdings are hemorrhaging money, and no one will tell me why. I thought you might enjoy the challenge. Elena felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not hope. Worse than hope. Interest. She pulled out a chair. Show me the numbers. They worked for 6 hours straight. No breaks, no small talk. He presented problems. She found patterns. He tested her conclusions. She defended them with data. Twice, he tried to argue with her analysis. Twice, she proved him wrong. The second time, he laughed. Short, surprised, genuine. When was the last time someone told you no? She asked. Years. It's refreshing. He leaned back, studying her. You don't defer. You hired me to think, not agree. If you wanted agreement, you'd have hired a man with mediocre credentials and desperate ambition. True. He stood, stretched. She tried not to notice the way his shirt sleeves pulled across his shoulders. Failed. Dinner? Is that part of the consulting arrangement? It's part of the being human arrangement. You've been working since 6 this morning. Her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. His mouth twitched. Fine, but I'm not... This doesn't mean... Miss Whitford. He waited until she met his eyes. I told you I intend to court you. I meant it. But I'm not an idiot. You'll decide if and when that happens. Until then, we're colleagues who occasionally eat food. Agreed? It was reasonable. Professional, even. So why did it feel like the most dangerous agreement she'd ever made? Agreed. Dinner was served in a smaller dining room, still absurdly formal by her standards, casual by his. He asked about her agricultural committee work. She asked about his parliamentary interests. They argued about trade policy for 40 minutes. It was the best conversation she'd had in years. He walked her to her guest room personally, stopped at the door like a gentleman. Tomorrow we tackle the textile mills. Fair warning, the numbers are worse. Good. I like challenges. I know. He hesitated and for the first time looked uncertain. Thank you for coming. For this. Elena didn't know what to do with his gratitude, didn't trust it, but she recognized sincerity when she heard it. "You're welcome, though I reserve the right to quit if you're secretly terrible." "Noted. Good night, Miss Whitford." "Good night, Your Grace." She closed the door, leaned against it, tried to inventory what she was feeling, and came up empty. This was work. Just work. He'd been clear about that. The fact that she'd laughed more today than in the last 5 years combined meant nothing. The fact that he looked at her like she mattered, like her thoughts, her analysis, her presence had value beyond what she could produce, that meant even less. She was 43, too old for foolishness. But alone in the dark, in a duke's guest room that probably cost more to furnish than her entire estate, Elena allowed herself one dangerous thought. What if this time was different? She smothered it immediately. Hope was expensive. She'd learned that lesson already. She wouldn't learn it again. The next 2 days followed the same pattern. Work, dinner, conversation that shouldn't have been interesting but was. He challenged her. She challenged back. They built something, not friendship exactly, but mutual respect, the kind forged through competence and honest argument. On the third evening, he asked her to stay through the weekend. "The ball is Saturday. I'd like you there." Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. "As a consultant, as my guest." "Your Grace." "Adrian?" He said it quietly. "When it's just us, call me Adrian." The intimacy of it nearly undid her. "This is moving too fast." "I disagree. I've wasted years on appropriate pacing with appropriate women. It didn't work. This works." "You barely know me. I know you're brilliant at systems analysis. I know you take your coffee with cream. I know you're terrified of being disappointed again, and that fear is the only thing standing between you and the life you actually want." She stood abruptly. "You don't get to psychoanalyze me." "Then tell me I'm wrong." She couldn't, because he wasn't. 23 years of careful invisibility, and he'd seen through all of it in 72 hours. "The ball," she said finally. "I'll attend. As a colleague. Nothing more. For now." His confidence should have been infuriating. Instead, it was oddly steadying, like he'd already decided her worth and was simply waiting for her to catch up. Saturday arrived too quickly. The dress arrived Friday night, deep emerald silk, perfectly tailored, clearly expensive. The note read, "You don't have to wear this, but you'd look extraordinary in it." She wore it, because she was practical, and fighting with the Duke over wardrobe choices was inefficient. Not because the color made her eyes stand out, not because she wanted to see his reaction, definitely not because some buried part of her wanted to be extraordinary again. The ballroom was already crowded when she arrived. A sea of silk, jewels, aristocratic faces arranged in careful hierarchies. She recognized the patterns immediately, the debutantes clustered near the dance floor, the matrons positioned for optimal gossip, the men calculating political advantages. She'd forgotten how much she hated this world. Adrian found her within minutes. His eyes swept over her once, thorough, appreciative. "Emerald suits you." "It's a well-made dress. It's perfect, but you'd be perfect in anything." Before she could respond, before she could figure out how to respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "Your Grace! How lovely to see you finally joining the festivities." The woman approaching was everything Elena wasn't. 25 at most, blonde, beautiful in the effortless way wealth and breeding produced. Her dress probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. Her smile was calculated precision. Lady Victoria Ashford. Elena remembered her from the scandal sheets. Connected, ambitious, exactly the kind of woman dukes married. "Lady Victoria," Adrian's tone was polite, distant. "You must introduce me to your guest." Victoria's eyes assessed Elena like livestock, found her wanting. "I don't believe we've met." "Miss Elena Whitford," Adrian said, "my senior strategic consultant." The emphasis on senior wasn't subtle. Neither was the way he'd positioned himself slightly closer to Elena. Victoria's smile sharpened. "How modern. Tell me, Miss Whitford, do you enjoy consulting work? It must be quite stimulating for someone of your experience." The word experience landed like a blade. Code for age, for unmarried, for desperate. Elena had heard versions of this speech for 20 years. Usually she smiled blandly and changed the subject. But something in her had shifted. Maybe it was the dress. Maybe it was 3 days of being treated like her thoughts mattered. Maybe it was the way Adrian was watching her now, not stepping in to rescue her, but waiting to see what she'd do. Extremely stimulating, Elena said pleasantly, though I imagine less so than the stimulation of, "What is it you do, Lady Victoria? Besides attend balls and pursue titled men?" The crowd around them went silent. Victoria's face flushed. "I support various charities. How generous. I restructure failing agricultural systems and prevent financial collapse. But charity work is lovely too." Adrian made a sound that might have been a cough, might have been laughter. Victoria's eyes narrowed. How fortunate that His Grace needs such specialized assistance. Though one wonders why a duke would require advice from an unmarried woman of limited means. Perhaps because intelligence isn't determined by marital status or bank balance. Elena stepped forward, just slightly, just enough. Or perhaps he simply prefers competence to decoration. The silence deepened. This was beyond rude. This was social warfare. Victoria recovered quickly. "My dear Miss Whitford, I meant no offense. Yes, you did. Let's not pretend otherwise. But if you'll excuse me, His Grace and I have business to discuss. Enjoy your evening." She turned to leave, felt Adrian's hand settle against her lower back. Brief, warm, claiming. "Shall we?" he murmured. They walked away together, leaving Victoria standing alone in a circle of scandalized whispers. Elena waited until they were out of earshot. "I shouldn't have said that." "You absolutely should have. That was magnificent. I just declared war on one of London's most influential families." "Good. They're boring anyway." He guided her toward the terrace doors. "Fresh air?" Outside, the night was cool. The music drifted through the windows, muffled and distant. Elena gripped the stone balustrade, adrenaline still singing through her veins. "I forgot how to do that," she said quietly. "Fight back. I spent so long being invisible, I forgot I could be seen." Adrian moved beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You were never invisible, Elena. You were just surrounded by people too stupid to look properly." The use of her first name should have shocked her. Instead, it felt inevitable. "This is a terrible idea." "Which part?" "All of it. You, me, this, whatever this is. I'm 43. I have gray hair and responsibilities and no patience for games. You're a duke. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want you." She turned to face him. "Why?" "Because you're brilliant. Because you don't defer. Because you called Lady Victoria decorative to her face, and I've never been more attracted to anyone in my life." This isn't, she struggled for words. "You don't know me well enough to want me, don't I?" He stepped closer. "You take your coffee with cream. You're left-handed, but pretend not to be because your governess tried to beat it out of you. You hate social gatherings, but you're devastating when you choose to engage. You've spent 20 years believing you're unworthy of attention because one mediocre man chose poorly. And you're terrified that if you let yourself hope again, it'll destroy you." His accuracy stole her breath. "How do you—" "I pay attention, Elena, to things that matter, and you matter." She should step back, should retreat to safety, should remember that powerful men didn't choose women like her without ulterior motives. Instead, she said, "If this is a game, if you're planning some humiliation, then I'm the worst strategist in England because I've just publicly claimed you in front of everyone who matters. If this fails, we both pay the price." The truth of it settled between them. He'd risked his reputation on her, defended her to Lady Victoria, stood beside her when he could have chosen safety. Either he was the best liar she'd ever met, or he actually meant it. "I'm going to disappoint you," she whispered. "I'm difficult and opinionated, and I've forgotten how to be charming." "Good. Charming is boring." He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to refuse, brushed a strand of gray hair back from her face. "I don't want charming, Elena. I want real. And you're the most real thing I've found in years." She should say no, should protect herself. Instead, she leaned into his touch, just slightly, just enough. His smile was worth every risk. "Dance with me," he said. "I haven't danced in 20 years. Then we'll both be terrible together." He led her back inside. The whispers started immediately. She could feel them like knives. Every eye in the ballroom tracked their movement to the dance floor. The music swelled. Adrian pulled her into position, proper, respectful, but unmistakably claiming. They moved together. Awkward at first, then smoother as muscle memory returned. She stumbled once. He steadied her without comment. "They're all watching," she murmured. "Let them." "Adrian, you called me Adrian." His eyes held hers. "Say it again." "This is insane." "Say it." "Adrian." His name felt dangerous in her mouth. "What are we doing?" "Exactly what I told you we'd do. I'm courting you, publicly, properly, and you're going to let me." "You're very arrogant." "I'm very certain. There's a difference." The dance ended. He didn't release her immediately. The room held its breath. Then he bowed, deep, formal, unmistakably reverent, and kissed her hand. The scandal rippled through the crowd like shockwaves. Elena felt her carefully constructed invisibility shatter completely. And for the first time in 23 years, she didn't try to repair it. She let herself be seen. The carriage ride back to Whitford Manor felt longer than the journey to London had been. Elena sat rigid against the velvet cushions, watching the countryside blur past, trying to calculate the exact magnitude of what she'd just done. She'd danced with a duke in front of everyone, while wearing emerald silk and completely forgetting, to be invisible. The scandal would reach the country estates by morning, the gossip columns by afternoon. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her lap, willing them still. "Stop it," she told herself. "You've survived worse." Except she wasn't sure that was true anymore. Mrs. Cathcart met her at the door, took one look at her face, and said nothing. Just helped her out of the expensive dress, brought tea that Elena didn't drink, and left her alone in the library where numbers usually made sense. They didn't make sense tonight. Elena stared at the ledgers until the candles burned low, trying to find the equation that would explain what was happening. Some formula that would prove Adrian Blackthorne's attention was temporary, strategic, anything other than what he claimed it was. She found nothing, just columns of numbers that refused to add up to safety. Sleep came in fragments. When dawn finally arrived, she gave up pretending and went to check on the tenants. Work had always been her solution. Physical labor, tangible problems, results she could measure. The South Field needed attention. She threw herself into it with the kind of focus that had kept her sane for 2 decades. Dirt under her fingernails, sun on her neck, decisions that mattered but didn't terrify her. She was elbow deep in irrigation calculations when the second letter arrived. Not from Adrian. From someone else entirely. The handwriting was feminine, precise. The seal belonged to Lady Catherine Ashford, Victoria's mother, and one of London's most formidable social architects. Elena's stomach dropped. She broke the seal standing in the South Field, dirt streaking the expensive paper. "Miss Whitford, I trust you enjoyed your brief moment of attention at Saturday's ball. How charming that His Grace has developed such unconventional tastes in his later years. I write not to criticize, we must all find entertainment where we can, but to offer friendly counsel. The Duke of Blackthorne requires a certain caliber of wife, someone who understands the responsibilities of the position, someone whose reputation is beyond reproach. Your performance in the ball, while amusing, demonstrated a concerning lack of judgment. For His Grace's sake, I hope you'll consider whether your continued association serves his best interests. A woman of your age and circumstances must surely understand that some positions are better left to those bred for them. Do consider the kindness I offer. Withdrawal now preserves dignity. Continued pursuit invites scrutiny you may find uncomfortable. With sincere regards, Lady Catherine Ashford." Elena read it twice. The threat was wrapped in silk, but it was still a threat. Withdrawal now preserves dignity. Continued pursuit invites scrutiny. Translation: disappear, or we'll destroy what's left of your reputation. She should have felt afraid, should have recognized this as the warning shot it was designed to be. Instead, she felt something closer to rage. 23 years ago, she'd withdrawn. She'd accepted society's judgment, internalized it, made herself small enough to avoid further damage. She'd survived by becoming exactly what they expected. Invisible, harmless, forgotten. And it had worked. She'd been safe. She'd also been half alive. Elena folded the letter carefully, tucked it in her pocket, went back to the irrigation problem with hands that no longer shook. By the time she returned to the manor house that evening, she'd made a decision. Not the safe one, not the smart one. The one that would either change everything or destroy her completely. She wrote 2 letters. The first went to Adrian, brief and professional. I'll need to review the shipping contracts we discussed. Thursday, if you're available. E. The second went to Lady Catherine Ashford. Elena spent an hour on it, choosing every word with surgical precision. Lady Catherine, thank you for your concern regarding my judgment and circumstances. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I am indeed a woman of 43, unmarried, and of modest means. These facts are neither shameful nor disqualifying. His Grace sought my professional expertise because I possess skills your circle apparently lacks, namely, the ability to solve complex problems without requiring constant validation. Your daughter is young, beautiful, and bred for exactly the life you describe. She is also calculating, shallow, and fundamentally uninteresting. His Grace recognized this within minutes of conversation. I have no interest in withdrawing. If you find this uncomfortable, I suggest developing more interesting daughters. Regards, Miss Elena Whitford. She sealed it before common sense could intervene, sent it with the Morning Post, then waited for the consequences. They arrived 48 hours later, though not in the form she'd expected. Adrian showed up at Whitford Manor unannounced, driving himself in a curricle like some reckless young lord instead of a duke approaching 50. He vaulted down before the horses had fully stopped, took the steps 2 at a time, and demanded to see her immediately. Mrs. Cathcart showed him to the library, eyebrows raised. He swept in like a storm system, threw a letter on her desk, her letter to Lady Catherine, and said, "Did you actually write this?" Elena looked up from her crop rotation schedules. Obviously, it has my signature. Elena, you told one of London's most powerful women to develop more interesting daughters. She implied I should disappear for your sake. I disagreed. He stared at her, then started laughing, the kind of helpless, shoulder-shaking laughter that suggested he'd been holding it in for miles. You're going to get eviscerated, he managed finally. The Ashfords have connections everywhere. They'll come after you with everything they have. I know. Your reputation was already ruined 23 years ago. I have nothing left to lose. His laughter died. That's not true, isn't it? She stood, moved around the desk. I'm 43, unmarried, managing a failing estate. Society wrote me off decades ago. They've been waiting for me to confirm their judgment. Well, fine, let them have it. Elena, no. She cut him off. You wanted honesty, real, not charming. This is what that looks like. I'm not going to apologize for defending myself. I'm done being invisible. He watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You understand what this means. War with the Ashfords, social exile, exactly the scandal you said you didn't want. I said I wasted years on appropriate women. I never said I wanted to avoid scandal. He stepped closer. I said I wanted you. Past tense or present? Present. Future. Every tense that exists. Something in her chest cracked. Not broke. Shifted. Like a door she'd welded shut was remembering how to open. They'll make it ugly, she warned. Good. I'm better at ugly than pretty. He caught her hand. Not possessive, just present. But I need to know you're certain. Once we do this, there's no going back to invisible. Elena looked down at their joined hands. His were scarred, old riding accidents maybe, or some other aristocratic pursuit. Hers were dirt-stained from the fields, calloused from actual work. They shouldn't fit, but they did. I'm terrified, she admitted. I spent 20 years building walls, and you've demolished them in 2 weeks. I don't know how to do this, how to be visible, how to want things again. So we figure it out together. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just necessary. He raised her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The same gesture from the ball, but private now. Intimate. Stay with me in London, not as a consultant, as my guest. Let me court you properly. Adrian, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking you to stop running long enough to see what this could be. It was too much, too fast. Every survival instinct she'd honed screamed at her to refuse. 1 week, she heard herself say. I'll give you 1 week. His smile was worth every risk. I'll take it. He stayed for dinner. They argued about agricultural policy and parliamentary corruption, and whether Shakespeare's sonnets were actually good or just pretentious. He left after midnight, kissing her hand again at the door, and she stood in the entrance hall feeling like she'd just jumped off a cliff. Mrs. Cathcart appeared from the shadows. You're going back to London. Apparently. Good, you've been dead long enough. The observation should have stung. Instead, it felt like permission. Elena returned to London the following Monday. This time, she brought more than ledgers and practical dresses. She brought the kind of wardrobe that suggested she might stay, might belong. Adrian met her carriage personally, handed her down like she was something precious instead of something useful. Fair warning, he said. Lady Catherine has been spreading rumors, creative ones. How creative? You're a fortune hunter who seduced me through witchcraft, or possibly blackmail. The story varies depending on who's telling it. Elena laughed. Couldn't help it. Witchcraft. At 43. How flattering. I thought so too. He offered his arm. Shall we give them something real to gossip about? They started with the opera, front box, visible to everyone. Elena wore deep burgundy silk, another gift that had appeared in her room with a note. The emerald was good. This is better. The stairs started the moment they entered. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Adrian ignored all of it, handed her into her seat, settled beside her close enough that their shoulders touched, and proceeded to explain the plot like they were the only two people in the building. It's absurd, he muttered during the second act. She's going to die for him, and he hasn't even noticed she exists. Romantic tragedy, Elena whispered back. Stupid tragedy. If you paid attention, she wouldn't need to die dramatically. You're ruining the opera. The opera is ruining itself. The soprano can't hit the high notes. She bit back a smile. You brought me here to critique the performance? I brought you here to be seen with you. The opera is incidental. He glanced at her, eyes warm in the dim light. Though watching you try not to laugh is significantly more entertaining than anything on stage. By intermission, half the audience was watching them instead of the performance. Elena felt their attention like heat, uncomfortable, unavoidable, nothing like the invisibility she'd grown accustomed to. Lady Victoria appeared during the interval, flanked by two equally perfect friends. Your Grace, Miss Whitford, how cozy you look. Adrian's expression went glacial. Lady Victoria, I simply must know, Miss Whitford, where did you acquire that dress? I'd love to recommend my seamstress if your current arrangement isn't quite meeting your needs. The implication was clear. The dress was too fine for someone of Elena's station, obviously borrowed, possibly charity. Elena smiled. His Grace has excellent taste. I trust his judgment completely. How modern. Victoria's eyes glittered. Though one wonders if judgment extends to all areas. After all, some investments appreciate over time, while others depreciate. The insult landed exactly as intended. Age, value, depreciation. Before Elena could respond, Adrian stepped forward, not aggressive, but unmistakably protective. Lady Victoria, a word of advice since you seem to struggle with social nuance. His voice was pleasant, his expression was not. When you insult Miss Whitford, you insult me. When you question my judgment, you suggest I'm either stupid or desperate. Neither is true. What is true is that I find your company tedious, your conversation vapid, and your presence increasingly unnecessary. The silence spread like spilled ink. Now, Adrian continued, you can apologize to Miss Whitford and salvage what's left of this interaction, or you can leave. Choose quickly. Victoria's face went white, then red. Your Grace, I meant no... You meant exactly what you said. Apologize or leave. Elena had never seen a grown woman shrink quite so completely. Victoria managed a strangled, "My apologies, Miss Whitford," before fleeing with her friends in tow. Adrian turned back to Elena, fury still simmering in his eyes. Are you all right? You just destroyed her in public. She deserved it. Adrian, no. He caught her hand right there in the crowded corridor where everyone could see. You don't get to defend the people who attack you. You don't have to smile and tolerate it anymore. I won't allow it. Something fierce and terrifying bloomed in her chest. You can't fight all my battles. Watch me. The third act passed in a blur. Elena couldn't focus on the performance, too aware of Adrian beside her, of the whispers that wouldn't stop, of the way he'd defended her without hesitation. No one had ever done that before. They left before the finale, stepping out into the cool London night. His carriage waited, but he dismissed it with a wave. Walk with me. They walked through Mayfair's quiet streets, her hand tucked in the crook of his arm. Gas lamps threw pools of golden light. Somewhere nearby, a clock struck 11. You didn't have to do that, Elena said finally. Yes, I did. You made an enemy tonight. The Ashfords won't forget. Good. I'm tired of pretending to tolerate people I despise. He stopped, turned to face her. Elena, I need you to understand something. I'm not courting you carefully. I'm not courting you appropriately. I'm courting you like I actually mean it, which means I will defend you publicly and repeatedly until everyone understands that you're not temporary. Adrian, I'm 47. I've wasted enough time on appropriate behavior with appropriate people. You are the first real thing that's happened to me in years. So yes, I'll fight your battles. I'll make enemies. I'll burn every social bridge if that's what it takes. She couldn't breathe. That's insane. Probably. He cupped her face, gentle, careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too much. Tell me anything except that you don't feel this too. Elena should step back, should protect herself, should remember that powerful men didn't really choose women like her, except he was choosing her, publicly, repeatedly, against all logic and social advantage. I feel it, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Good. Terror means it matters. His thumb brushed her cheek. Let it matter, Elena. Stop running. She'd spent 23 years running, building walls, choosing safety over risk. She was so tired of running. Elena rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't careful, wasn't appropriate, was probably the worst decision she'd made in a lifetime of questionable choices. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, turned desperate. She'd forgotten what this felt like, wanting someone, being wanted back, the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone in. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me. Her heart stopped. Adrian? Not like that. Not yet. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But let me wake up tomorrow knowing you're under my roof. Let me have breakfast with you. Let me have more than stolen moments and public performances. It was too fast, too much. Every rule she'd lived by said to refuse. 1 week, she reminded him. I said 1 week. It's only Tuesday. I have 5 more days to convince you to stay longer. She laughed despite herself. You're very confident. I'm very certain. There's a difference. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise instead of a question. Say yes. Elena thought about Whitford Manor, about empty rooms and careful loneliness, about 23 years of being safe and invisible and half alive. Yes. They made it back to Blackthorn House near midnight. The staff had long since retired. Adrian led her through silent corridors to the residential wing, stopped outside a door 3 down from his own. Your room. If you need anything, I know where you are. His smile was almost shy. Good. Good night, Elena. Good night. She closed the door, leaned against it, tried to process what she'd just agreed to, living in a duke's house, being courted openly, kissing him in public streets like some reckless girl instead of a woman who knew better. She should feel guilty, should feel afraid. Instead, she felt awake. For the first time in decades, completely awake. She was still standing there, marveling at the strangeness of it all, when the knock came. Soft, hesitant. She opened the door. Adrian stood there, still fully dressed, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen. I forgot to tell you something. What? I'm falling in love with you. He said it simply, like he was reporting the weather. I thought you should know. Before this goes further, before you decide whether to stay. Elena's world tilted. Adrian, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He started to turn away. Wait! He stopped. Elena's hands were shaking again, but this time she didn't try to stop them. I don't know how to do this. I've forgotten how to hope, how to want things, how to believe someone like you could actually… She broke off, struggling for words. Could actually what? Choose me, for real, without conditions or time limits or strategic advantage. He stepped back into the doorway, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes, the absolute certainty in his expression. I choose you, Elena, unconditionally, for as long as you'll let me. She kissed him again, pulled him into the room, slammed the door. This time, when his arms came around her, she didn't think about consequences or tomorrow or what society would say. She just let herself be chosen. They broke apart eventually, both flushed and breathing hard. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, hands still framing her face. I should go, he said, without moving. Probably. If I stay, I know. Elena. Her name was a question. She answered by kissing him again. They didn't sleep much that night. By dawn, Elena's carefully constructed rules had shattered completely. She lay in Adrian's arms, watching morning light paint the ceiling, and felt something she'd thought long dead, hope. Fragile and terrifying and absolutely real. What are you thinking? Adrian's voice was rough with sleep. That I've made a terrible mistake. His arms tightened. Elena, not you, this. She gestured vaguely at the room, at them, at everything. I'm 43. You're a duke. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The Ashfords won't stop. Society won't forgive. Every gossip sheet in London will let them. He kissed her temple. I don't care what they print. You should. Your reputation survived my first wife's death. Survived 15 years of refusing to remarry. Will survive this. He tilted her face toward his. The question isn't what they'll say. The question is whether you can survive them saying it. Elena thought about the last 23 years, about making herself small and safe and invisible, about surviving by refusing to feel anything too deeply. I don't know, she admitted. Then we'll find out together. That should have terrified her. Instead, it steadied her. They were still tangled together, debating whether breakfast was worth leaving bed for, when the urgent knocking started. Adrian groaned. Ignore it. The knocking intensified. Your Grace, his secretary's voice tight with anxiety. We have a situation. Adrian extracted himself reluctantly, pulled on enough clothes to be decent, and opened the door a crack. This better be catastrophic. The morning papers, Your Grace. The secretary thrust a newspaper through the gap. All of them. Elena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, watched Adrian's expression shift from annoyed to furious. What is it? He handed her the paper without comment. The headline screamed across the front page. Blackthorn's Folly. Duke, seduced by aging spinster's dark arts. The article below was worse. A detailed account of their opera appearance, complete with speculation about her motives, her character, and her unnatural hold over the Duke. Lady Catherine had clearly coordinated a full assault, but that wasn't what made Elena's stomach drop. At the bottom of the article was a name she hadn't heard in 23 years. Sources close to Miss Whitford report a history of inappropriate attachments to titled men above her station. In 1827, she pursued Lord Edmund Hartley relentlessly despite his engaged status, resulting in scandal and her subsequent exile from polite society. That's not… Elena's voice cracked. That's not what happened. Adrian was already reading the other papers his secretary had brought. Each one carried variations of the same story, the same lies. She'd been 20. Edmund had pursued her, courted her, promised her everything, then abandoned her for a better match and let society believe she'd been the aggressor. The desperate spinster who wouldn't accept rejection. She'd lived with that shame for 2 decades, built her entire life around escaping it, and now they'd resurrected it, made it worse, made her the villain of a story she'd never wanted to be part of. Elena. Adrian's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Look at me. She couldn't. just stared at the newspaper, watching her carefully reconstructed life dissolve into ink and lies. Elena. Finally, she looked up. His expression was absolute fury, but none of it directed at her. "This is war," he said quietly. "They're trying to destroy you to get to me, and they've made a catastrophic miscalculation." "What miscalculation?" His smile was sharp enough to cut. "They assumed I'd care what they print. They assumed wrong." He kissed her hard, claiming and furious and absolutely certain. Then he pulled away, started dressing with military efficiency. "What are you doing?" "Going to war." He shrugged into his jacket. "They want a scandal? Fine. I'll give them one they'll never forget. Adrian, trust me." He stopped at the door, looked back. "Do you trust me?" She should say no, should protect herself, should recognize this as the disaster it was. "Yes," she said instead. His smile gentled. "Good. Stay here. Don't read any more papers. I'll handle this." He was gone before she could argue. Elena sat alone in his bed, surrounded by newspaper lies, and wondered if trust was just another word for suicide. Elena lasted exactly 20 minutes before she broke Adrian's instruction and read every newspaper the secretary had left. Each one was worse than the last. They dug up Edmund Hartley's name, twisted the story until she was the predator and he the victim. One paper claimed she'd used feminine wiles to trap him. Another suggested mental instability. A third printed a quote from an anonymous source close to the family, saying she'd threatened self-harm when Edmund chose his proper fiancée. All lies. Every single word. But lies printed in black and white carried weight that truth never could. Her hands shook as she set down the last paper. She'd survived this once by disappearing, by making herself so small and invisible that eventually people forgot to keep attacking. But Adrian had pulled her into the light, and now there was nowhere to hide. The door opened. Mrs. Cathcart swept in. When had she arrived from Whitford? Carrying a tray and wearing an expression that could freeze wine. "Stop reading those," she said, snatching the papers away. His grace sent word. "I'm to keep you fed and away from any further nonsense." It's not nonsense when it destroys your reputation. Your reputation was destroyed at 20 by a coward who wouldn't claim you. This is just the same cowards realizing you're not destroyed after all. She poured tea with sharp, efficient movements. "Drink. You look half dead." Elena accepted the cup because arguing with Mrs. Cathcart was pointless. "Where did Adrian go?" "To handle it," he said, didn't specify how. Her expression softened slightly. "He's not Edmund Hartley, miss. He won't leave you to face this alone." "You don't know that." "I've been watching men fail you for 43 years. I know the difference between a man who means what he says and one who's playing games." She set down the teapot with deliberate care. "That Duke means it. Question is whether you're brave enough to believe him." Before Elena could respond, raised voices erupted from somewhere below. Men's voices. Multiple. Angry. Mrs. Cathcart moved to the window. "There's a crowd forming outside, reporters looks like, and, oh dear?" "What?" "Lady Catherine Ashford just arrived in a very public carriage, with what appears to be half of London society." Elena's stomach turned to ice. She moved to the window, looked down at the growing mob. 20 people, maybe more, all clearly there for the spectacle. Lady Catherine stood at the center like a general surveying a battlefield. This wasn't just scandal anymore. This was a siege. "I need to leave." Elena set down her cup, started looking for her clothes. "If I'm not here, they can't..." "Can't what?" "They've already printed the lies. Running now just confirms them." "Staying confirms I'm exactly what they say, a desperate woman clinging to status above her station." "No." Mrs. Cathcart caught her arm. "Staying proves you have nothing to hide. Running proves you're ashamed." "I am ashamed." The admission tore out of her. "I've been ashamed for 23 years. I built my entire life around that shame, and now Adrian's dragged me into the light, and everyone can see exactly how pathetic I am." "You're not pathetic. You're terrified. There's a difference." Elena pulled away, started dressing with shaking hands. "I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. Let them have their scandal. Let Adrian find someone appropriate. Let me go back to being invisible where it's safe." "Is that what you want? Safety?" "Yes. No, I don't know." She fumbled with her buttons, fingers refusing to cooperate. I just know I can't stand here and watch them destroy him because he made the mistake of wanting me. Mrs. Cathcart's expression turned stern. Then you're a coward after all. The words hit like a slap. I survived, Elena said quietly. For 23 years, I survived when everyone expected me to crumble. That's not cowardice. Survival isn't the same as living, and right now, you're choosing survival. She moved to the door, paused. His Grace is downstairs fighting for you. The least you could do is not abandon him while he's doing it. She left before Elena could argue. Alone again, Elena stared at her reflection in the mirror. 43 years old, gray threading through her hair. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when Edmund Hartley had whispered promises he never meant. She looked exactly like what the papers said. A woman past her prime, desperate for relevance, clinging to a man who would inevitably realize his mistake. Except Adrian hadn't treated her that way. Not once. He'd hired her for her mind, defended her publicly, chose her over every appropriate option society offered, and she was seriously considering running away while he fought her battles. Damn it! She finished dressing properly, pinned up her hair with hands that had steadied. Damn it, damn it, damn it! She was absolutely going to regret this. But she went downstairs anyway. The entrance hall was chaos. Adrian stood at the center, still in the clothes he'd thrown on an hour ago, facing down Lady Catherine Ashford, while reporters crowded the doorway and half of London society whispered behind fans and handkerchiefs. Ridiculous display of poor judgment, Lady Catherine was saying, her voice carrying to every corner. That woman has manipulated you, Your Grace. Clearly you're not thinking rationally. My thinking is perfectly rational. Adrian's voice was cold enough to frost glass. What's irrational is your assumption that I need your approval for anything. The entire city is talking about this scandal. Good, let them talk. I'm done pretending to care what small minds think about my personal choices. Lady Catherine's face flushed. That woman is using you. That woman, Elena said from the stairs, is standing right here. Every head turned. The whispers intensified. She descended slowly, channeling every ounce of dignity she'd hoarded over 2 decades of invisibility. Adrian's expression shifted when he saw her, relief mixed with something fiercer. Miss Whitford, Lady Catherine said with venomous sweetness. How convenient. Perhaps you can explain to His Grace why you've entrapped him with your particular talents. I haven't entrapped anyone. His Grace made his own choices. Did he? Or did you manipulate a lonely widower with practiced seduction? The accusation hung in the air. Elena felt every eye on her, waiting to see if she'd crumble. 23 years ago, she would have apologized, withdrawn, accepted the judgment as deserved. But she'd spent last night in Adrian's arms, had felt what it was like to be chosen deliberately, enthusiastically, without shame. She wasn't the same woman who'd fled London at 20. You're suggesting, Elena said carefully, that the Duke of Blackthorn, a man who successfully managed 17 estates, survived parliamentary battles, and built one of England's largest fortunes, is somehow too weak-minded to recognize manipulation when he sees it? Confusion flickered across Lady Catherine's face. I'm suggesting he's been deceived. By what? My overwhelming youth and beauty? Elena gestured to herself. I'm 43. I have gray hair and a failing estate. If I were trying to trap a duke, I'm doing a spectacularly poor job of it. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Your age is precisely the point, Lady Catherine snapped. A woman of your years, unmarried, with no prospects, naturally you'd leap at any opportunity. Naturally I'd be desperate, you mean. Too old for honest affection, so I must be scheming for position. Elena stepped off the last stair, moved closer. Tell me, Lady Catherine, what does it say about your daughter that His Grace preferred an aging spinster to her? What does that suggest about the options you've been presenting? The crowd went silent. Victoria, standing behind her mother, went pale. How dare you? Lady Catherine hissed. How dare I? You've spent the last week printing lies about me, destroying what remained of my reputation, dragging up painful history and twisting it into ammunition. Elena's voice stayed level, but fury burned beneath it. You've done everything possible to humiliate me publicly, and now you're upset that I'm defending myself? You're a social climber who, I'm a woman who salvaged a failing estate through competence and hard work. I've increased agricultural yields, managed complex financial systems, and solved problems your circle can't even understand. His Grace didn't pursue me because I'm charming or decorative. He pursued me because I'm useful, because I can think, because I treat him like a person instead of a title. Adrian moved to her side. Didn't touch her, but his presence was support enough. Lady Catherine, he said quietly, you have two options. You can apologize to Miss Whitford for the slander you've spread and leave quietly. Or you can continue this attack, and I will systematically destroy every social connection your family has built over 3 generations. The threat was delivered without heat, which made it infinitely more effective. Lady Catherine's mouth opened, closed. She looked around for support, found none. The crowd was too busy watching the spectacle to offer assistance. You wouldn't dare, she managed finally. Test me. Adrian's smile was sharp. I have more money, better connections, and significantly less patience than you're assuming. Every invitation your family receives goes through social circles I control. Every business deal your husband pursues requires my approval somewhere down the chain. You've built your influence on a foundation I can remove with 3 conversations. This is extortion. This is consequences. You attacked someone under my protection. Did you think I'd simply allow it? Elena watched Lady Catherine's face cycle through fury, calculation, and finally fear. The older woman was powerful, but Adrian was right. His reach went deeper, his influence more entrenched. I apologize, Lady Catherine said stiffly, not looking at Elena, for any misunderstanding. Not to me, Adrian said, to her. Lady Catherine's jaw worked. Finally, she turned to Elena. My apologies, Miss Whitford. I may have overreacted. It wasn't sincere, didn't matter. The public apology would carry weight the newspapers couldn't ignore. Accepted, Elena said, because prolonging this served no purpose. Lady Catherine gathered her dignity like shattered glass and swept toward the door. Victoria followed, not meeting anyone's eyes. The crowd parted to let them through. The moment they were gone, the reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Adrian raised a hand. Somehow, they quieted. One statement, he said, then you all leave. Are we clear? Frantic nodding, pencils poised over notebooks. Miss Elena Whitford is not a scandal. She's the most intelligent, capable woman I've met in decades. I've courted her deliberately, enthusiastically, and with full understanding of what London society thinks appropriate. He paused, let that sink in. I don't care what you print. I don't care what society whispers. Miss Whitford has my respect, my admiration, and my complete devotion. Print that. The scratching of pencils was the only sound. Now get out of my house. They scattered like startled birds. Within minutes, the entrance hall was empty, except for Adrian, Elena, and a handful of stunned staff members. Adrian turned to her. Are you all right? Elena's hands were shaking again. Adrenaline, probably, or delayed terror, or the realization of what she'd just done. I called Lady Catherine's daughter, uninteresting to her face, in front of reporters. You did. It was magnificent. Adrian, this is... She couldn't finish the sentence. Too many emotions fighting for space. He pulled her close, right there in the entrance hall, where any remaining servants could see. You were perfect. I was terrified. Good. Terror means it mattered, and you did it anyway. He kissed her forehead. That's not cowardice, Elena. That's courage. She pressed her face against his chest, trying to steady her breathing. They're going to print terrible things tomorrow. Probably. We'll survive it. You don't know that. I know I'd rather fight beside you than be comfortable with anyone else. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But if this is too much, if you need to step back... No. The word came out stronger than she expected. No, I'm done running. I'm done letting cruel people define who I am. She managed a shaky smile. Besides, I already called Victoria uninteresting. Might as well commit to the scandal. His laugh was relief and pride mixed together. That's my girl. My girl, the possessive should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like coming home. They spent the rest of the day holed up in Adrian's study, ignoring the world outside. He taught her chess. She was terrible at it. She explained crop rotation systems. He actually paid attention. They argued about everything from tax policy to whether strawberries belonged in savory dishes. It felt normal, impossibly, wonderfully normal. By evening, the first afternoon editions started arriving. The headlines were mixed. Blackthorn declares devotion to controversial companion. Aging. Duke or true romance? Society divided on scandalous courtship. Lady Catherine forced to apologize after public confrontation. Not perfect, but not the complete character assassination Elena had braced for. They're not sure what to make of us, Adrian observed, scanning the articles. Half think I'm delusional, half think it's romantic. None of them can quite figure out the angle. Because there isn't one. That's what confuses them. Exactly. He set down the papers, pulled her onto his lap with easy familiarity. Let them be confused. We know the truth. Elena settled against him, still marveling at how natural this felt. How right. What happens now? She asked. Now we stop hiding. I take you to every event, every dinner, every public gathering. We make them accept us through sheer persistence. That sounds exhausting. It will be, but I'm excellent at persistence. He kissed her neck, gentle and deliberate. And you're excellent at not backing down. We'll manage. They were still wrapped together, debating which social events were worth attending when the urgent knock came again. Adrian groaned. What now? His secretary burst in without waiting for permission, face pale. Your Grace, there's been a development. The tone made Elena's stomach drop. What kind of development? Lord Edmund Hartley has published a letter. It's in all the evening editions. Elena went cold. Edmund. After 23 years of silence, he'd chosen now to speak. Adrian was already reaching for the paper the secretary offered. His expression darkened as he read. What does it say? Elena's voice came out steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. He handed her the paper without comment. The letter was short, devastating. To the editors, recent coverage of the Duke of Blackthorn's unfortunate entanglement has compelled me to break my long silence regarding Miss Elena Whitford. 23 years ago, Miss Whitford pursued me with alarming intensity despite my engagement to another woman. When I made clear that her attentions were unwelcome, she became increasingly erratic. I chose not to publicly address her behavior at the time out of gentlemanly discretion, allowing her to retreat from society with some dignity and tact. I see now that my silence was a mistake. His Grace deserves to know the truth about the woman he's defending. Miss Whitford's current attachment follows a troubling pattern of pursuing men above her station with little regard for propriety or truth. I bear her no ill will, but I cannot stand by while she manipulates another honorable man. His Grace is well respected and deserving of better counsel than he has clearly received. With sincere concern, Lord Edmund Hartley. Elena read it twice. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed even. She felt nothing at all, just a vast cold emptiness where rage or hurt should have been. Elena. Adrian's voice came from very far away. She set down the paper carefully. He's lying. I know. He pursued me. He promised me everything. Then he chose a better match and let everyone believe I was the desperate one. Her voice was clinical, detached. I was 20 years old. I believed him. And when he left, I thought it was my fault for not being good enough. Elena, I built my entire life around that shame, made myself invisible because I thought I deserved it, thought I'd been foolish and desperate and exactly what they said I was. She looked up, met Adrian's eyes. But I wasn't. I was just young, and he was a coward who needed someone to blame. Adrian's expression was pure fury. I'm going to destroy him. No. Elena, no. If you destroy him, you prove he matters. You prove his words have power. She stood, paced to the window. Outside, London glittered in the gaslight, beautiful and treacherous. He's already taken 23 years of my life. I won't give him another moment. We have to respond. This letter, people will believe him. Some will. Others won't. And the ones who believe him were never going to accept me anyway. She turned back. I can't control what London society thinks. I can only control whether I let their judgment define me. That's very philosophical, but it doesn't change the fact that he's slandering you. He's been slandering me for 2 decades. This is just the first time he's done it in print. Something hardened in her chest. But if he thinks I'll run away again, he's miscalculated badly. Adrian moved to her side. What are you thinking? That I'm done letting men tell my story for me? Edmund had his say. Now I get mine. Elena, if you publish a response, I'm not publishing anything. I'm going to tell the truth to the one person who matters. She caught his hands. You. You're the one he's trying to convince. So I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, and you're going to decide whether you believe him or me. I already believe you. You believe me now, but doubts are insidious. Eventually you'll wonder if maybe there's some truth to it, if maybe I'm exactly what he says. Her throat tightened. So I need to tell you everything, all of it, the humiliating, painful, ugly truth, and then you get to choose. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't need... Yes, you do, because otherwise this will always be between us. The question of whether he's right, whether I'm the woman you think I am, or the desperate schemer he's describing. She pulled her hands away, wrapped her arms around herself. So here's the truth. All of it. She told him. Everything she'd buried for 23 years. How Edmund had courted her at her first season. How he'd been charming and attentive and seemingly sincere. How he'd kissed her in the garden at the Rothschild ball and whispered that he'd speak to her father. How 3 weeks later he'd announced his engagement to Lady Margaret Sutton, better connected, wealthier, more appropriate. How Elena had confronted him, demanded to know why he'd lied. How he'd looked at her with something close to pity and said, "Did you really think I meant it? You're sweet, Elena, but you're not Duchess material." How she'd spent the next month watching him marry someone else while society whispered about the desperate girl who couldn't accept rejection. I didn't threaten self-harm, she said quietly. I just stopped functioning, stopped eating properly, stopped leaving my room. My mother was terrified. Eventually, we left London because there was nothing left for me there. No prospects, no future, just shame. Adrian's expression was unreadable. I rebuilt myself in the country, Elena continued. Learned to manage the estate, learned to be useful instead of decorative. Learned that the only person I could trust was myself. She met his eyes, but I never stopped believing that maybe Edmund was right. Maybe I was too desperate, too naive, too foolish. Maybe I deserved what happened. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Adrian spoke. He's a coward and a liar, and I'm going to ruin him. Relief nearly buckled her knees. Adrian, no, listen to me. He crossed to her in 3 strides, caught her face between his hands. You were 20 years old. He was a grown man who manipulated you deliberately. Nothing about that was your fault. Nothing. Society won't see it that way. Society can burn for all I care. His voice was fierce. You were honest about your feelings. He lied about his intentions. That's not naivety. That's trust misplaced. And the fact that you survived it, built a life anyway, made yourself into someone extraordinary, that's not weakness, Elena. That's strength. Tears stung her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. I spent 23 years believing I was broken. You're not broken. You're careful. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. And I'm honored that you trusted me enough to stop being careful. She laughed, wet and shaky, but genuine. This is such a disaster. Probably, but we're in it together now. A thought struck her. Edmund's letter, it's going to get worse. Every gossip sheet in London will pick it up. Your reputation will survive. We've been over this. Adrian, you don't understand. They're going to drag this out for weeks, months, maybe. Every detail of my past, every mistake I've made, it'll all be ammunition. She pulled back to look at him properly. You could end this. Tell everyone you've reconsidered, that I'm a pleasant consultant but not appropriate for Elena. He cut her off gently. Stop. I'm trying to give you an exit. I don't want an exit. I want you. He smiled, crooked and certain. All of you. Past mistakes included. Scandal attached. Every complicated, difficult, brilliant part. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it physically hurt. What if Edmund's right? What if I am just... He's not right. And even if you were everything he claimed, desperate and scheming and completely inappropriate, I'd still choose you, because the woman who rebuilt herself from nothing, who defended herself in front of London society, who called Lady Catherine's daughter uninteresting to her face, that woman is worth any amount of scandal. Elena kissed him. desperate, grateful, terrified. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I love you. I'm probably going to regret saying it, but I love you. His smile was sunrise after a long night. About time. I've been waiting for you to catch up. They were still tangled together when the study door burst open. Victoria Ashford stood there, breathing hard, her perfect composure completely shattered. I need to speak with you both, she said. Now. Before my mother finds out I'm here. Adrian moved in front of Elena instinctively. Lady Victoria, this is highly inappropriate. I know what my mother did. Victoria's voice shook. I know about the letters, the newspapers, all of it. She looked directly at Elena. And I know the truth about Edmund Hartley, because he did the same thing to me. The room went silent. What? Elena managed. Victoria's composure cracked further. 3 years ago, before my debut, he courted me privately, promised marriage, then chose someone wealthier. When I confronted him, he told me I should be grateful he'd even paid attention to someone so... She swallowed hard. He has a pattern. Young women, always from good families but not quite good enough. He pursues them just long enough to destroy their confidence, then abandons them publicly. Adrian's expression turned murderous. Why are you telling us this? Because what my mother's doing is wrong, and because Edmund Hartley is a predator who's been protected by society for decades. She straightened, gathering her courage. I want to publish the truth, my account and Miss Whitford's, together. Let society see the pattern. Elena's heart hammered. Victoria, if you do that, your reputation will be ruined, I know. Victoria's laugh was bitter. But it's already half ruined by my association with Mother's vendetta against you. And I'm tired of pretending Edmund was the victim when he's destroyed dozens of women. Dozens? Adrian's voice was dangerous. At least. I started asking questions after... She gestured vaguely. After. There are others. Women who left London suddenly. Women who never married. Women who disappeared into country estates and never came back. She met Elena's eyes. You weren't the first. You won't be the last unless someone stops him. Elena felt the world tilt. All those years of shame, of believing she'd been uniquely foolish, and she'd just been one name in a long line of victims. Why come to us? She asked carefully. Because you're the first one who's fought back. The first one who didn't just disappear quietly. Victoria's smile was small and sad. And because his grace was right when he called me shallow and calculating. I am. But I'm also tired of watching my mother destroy people for sport. And I'm tired of men like Edmund Hartley getting away with it. Adrian looked at Elena. Your call. It was a risk. Massive. Potentially catastrophic. Publishing Victoria's account alongside hers would mean exposing everything, reliving the worst moments, making herself even more vulnerable. But it would also mean other women wouldn't have to suffer alone. We do it, Elena said. But not just us. We find the others. Every woman Edmund Hartley destroyed. We tell all the stories. Victoria's eyes widened. That could take weeks. Then we take weeks. But we do it right. Elena felt something fierce crystallizing in her chest. Society protected him for 23 years. Time someone stood up for the women he broke. Adrian's smile was pure pride. That's my girl. They spent the next hour planning. Victoria knew 3 other women personally, all who'd left London under mysterious circumstances years ago. Elena remembered 2 more from her own season who'd disappeared suddenly. It wasn't enough to destroy Edmund completely, but it was enough to start asking questions society had ignored for decades. By the time Victoria left, sneaking out through the servants' entrance to avoid her mother, they had the beginnings of a strategy. This is going to get ugly, Adrian warned as they climbed the stairs toward bed. It already is ugly. At least now we're fighting back. In his room, their room, she was starting to think of it, Elena finally let the exhaustion catch up. She sagged against him, borrowed strength from his solid presence. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. Terror means, it matters, I know. She looked up at him. But what if this doesn't work? What if we expose everything and society just doesn't care? Then at least we tried. At least those women know someone believed them. He kissed her softly. But it will work. Because you're brilliant and stubborn and impossible to ignore. They fell into bed together, exhausted and terrified and absolutely committed. Elena was almost asleep when Adrian spoke again. Edmund Hartley's finished, even if the stories don't stick. I'll make sure he never hurts anyone again. How? I own the bank that holds his estate mortgages, and his shipping investments go through my brokers, and his parliamentary seat depends on support from men I drink with regularly. His voice was pleasant, deadly. By the time I'm done, he'll be lucky to keep his title. Everything else is negotiable. Elena should probably feel bad about that, should probably argue for mercy or restraint. Instead, she felt savage satisfaction. Good, she said. They were still tangled together, planning Edmund's systematic destruction, when the final crisis of the night arrived. The window shattered, glass exploded inward. Adrian threw himself over Elena automatically, shielding her from the worst of it. When the chaos settled, they found a brick on the floor, wrapped in paper. Adrian picked it up carefully, unfolded the note. His expression went absolutely cold. What does it say? Elena's voice shook. He handed it to her. Whore. You've destroyed one good man. We won't let you destroy another. Leave London or next time we won't miss. Elena stared at the brick in her hands, glass shards glittering on the carpet around them. The threat was crude, violent, the kind of escalation that meant someone was getting desperate. Adrian was already at the door, bellowing for staff. Within seconds, the room filled with servants and guards. He issued orders with military precision. Secure the house, find witnesses, get the constable. Elena barely heard him. She was too busy being angry, not afraid, not shaken, furious. Miss Whitford, perhaps you should sit, someone suggested. No. She set the brick down carefully. I'm done sitting. I'm done being quiet. Someone just threw a brick through a window and threatened my life, and I'm finished letting cruel people dictate my choices. Adrian's hand found hers, squeezed. What do you need? Paper, ink, and every woman Victoria mentioned. We're not waiting weeks to build this case. We're doing it now. His smile was fierce. That's my girl. They worked through the night. Victoria returned before dawn with two of the women she'd mentioned, Lady Margaret Pierce and Miss Sarah Thornton. Both had left London years ago under mysterious circumstances. Both had been pursued by Edmund Hartley. Elena made tea while Adrian cleared his study. The women sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable, not quite meeting each other's eyes. Thank you for coming, Elena said finally, setting down the tea tray. I know this is difficult. Lady Victoria said you were collecting testimonies. Margaret's voice was quiet, careful. About Edmund Hartley. Yes, about what he did. The pattern of it. Elena poured tea with steady hands. I was 20 when he courted me, promised marriage, then chose someone wealthier and let society believe I'd been the desperate one who couldn't accept rejection. Margaret's cup rattled slightly. He told me the same thing, that I should be grateful he'd even noticed me, that I was pretty but not quite suitable. He said I was charming, but my family connections weren't strong enough, Sarah added softly. I was 19. I believed him when he said he loved me. The story spilled out. Different details, same pattern. Edmund targeted young women from good families who weren't quite at the top of the social ladder. He courted them privately, promised them everything, then publicly chose better matches while positioning himself as the victim of their inappropriate attachment. There are more, Victoria said. I started asking questions yesterday. At least 8 women I know of who left London suddenly after encounters with Edmund, and probably dozens more who never came forward. Elena set down her cup. Then we find them, all of them, and we publish every story. The scandal will be enormous, Margaret warned. Good. Let it be enormous. Let everyone see what he's been doing for decades while society looked the other way. Elena's voice hardened. He destroyed my life when I was 20, made me believe I was worthless. I spent 23 years hiding because of his lies. I'm done hiding. Adrian had been watching from near the window, letting the women talk. Now he spoke. I can protect you, all of you. Whatever social consequences come from this, I have enough influence to shield you. Why would you do that? Sarah asked. Because someone should have done it 20 years ago, and because Elena's right. This has to stop. They spent the next 3 days tracking down women. It was harder than Elena expected. Some had married and moved abroad. Others had died. A few refused to speak. But they found 11 willing to tell their stories. 11 women, spanning 2 decades. The pattern was undeniable. Elena drafted the article herself, working late into each night. Adrian brought her coffee and argued with her word choices and reminded her to eat. Victoria coordinated logistics, used her society connections to verify details, and steadily burned every bridge with her mother in the process. "She's going to disown me," Victoria said on the 3rd night, scanning Elena's latest draft. "Probably," Elena agreed. "Are you sure about this?" Victoria's smile was sad. "I've spent my entire life being exactly what she wanted. Perfect, decorative, strategically useful, and I've been miserable." She looked up. "You called me shallow and calculating. You were right, but I don't have to stay that way." "No," Elena said. "You don't." They published on a Thursday. Not in the gossip sheets, those were too easily dismissed. Instead, Adrian used his parliamentary connections to place the article in the London Times, alongside sworn affidavits from all 11 women. The headline was Elena's doing. "The Predator. London Society. Protected. A pattern of deliberate cruelty." The article was thorough, damning, impossible to ignore. It laid out Edmund's methods in clinical detail, how he selected targets, how he manipulated them, how he positioned himself as the victim when they inevitably reacted to his betrayal. It named names, included dates, provided evidence, and it ended with a direct challenge. How many more women must suffer before society acknowledges that Lord Edmund Hartley is not a gentleman wronged by desperate women, but a predator who has systematically destroyed lives for his own amusement? The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. By noon, every drawing room in London was talking about it. By evening, Edmund had published a furious rebuttal calling the women liars and attention seekers. By the next morning, 3 more women had come forward with their own stories. Elena watched the scandal unfold from Adrian's study, surrounded by newspapers and correspondence. Some publications defended Edmund, dismissed the women as opportunists. Others called for investigation. A few brave souls suggested that maybe, just maybe, 11 separate women with identical stories couldn't all be lying. "It's working," Victoria said, reading over Elena's shoulder. "People are starting to question him. Some people. Others think we're hysterical women inventing drama." Elena set down another dismissive editorial. "This could still fail." "It won't." Adrian entered carrying more letters. "I've been calling in favors. 7 members of Parliament have agreed to support an inquiry into Edmund's conduct, and 3 of London's major banks have quietly informed him that his credit is no longer reliable." Elena looked up sharply. "You're destroying him financially." "I'm allowing natural consequences to occur. Banks don't like lending to men with credibility problems." His smile was sharp, and Edmund now has significant credibility problems. The backlash came that afternoon. Lady Catherine published her own response, defending Edmund and attacking Elena's character. She claimed the entire article was revenge orchestrated by a bitter woman who couldn't accept rejection decades ago. It should have hurt, should have undermined everything they'd built. Instead, it made Elena laugh. "What's funny?" Adrian asked, reading over her shoulder. "She's desperate. Look at this. She's not actually defending Edmund's actions. She's just attacking me personally, which means she knows the stories are true and has no real argument against them. So we push harder. The next move came from an unexpected source. Sarah Thornton's father, a retired admiral with significant social connections, published his own letter demanding a formal investigation. He was followed by Margaret's brother, a prominent barrister who offered to represent any woman willing to pursue legal action. The momentum was shifting, not everywhere, not completely, but enough that Elena could feel the balance changing. The real turning point came a week after publication. Elena was reviewing correspondence when Mrs. Cathcart entered, looking shaken. "Miss Elena, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent." The woman was elderly, elegantly dressed, with the kind of bearing that suggested old money and older pain. She introduced herself as Lady Beatrice Hartley, Edmund's aunt. Elena's stomach tightened. "Lady Beatrice, I'm not sure this is appropriate." "My nephew is a predator." The older woman's voice was steady, final. "I've known it for 30 years. I've watched him destroy young women and convince society they were to blame. And I've said nothing because I was a coward who valued family reputation over truth." Silence filled the room. "Why are you here now?" Adrian asked carefully. Because I'm 76 years old and I'm tired of protecting him. And because Miss Whitford's article is the first time anyone has publicly challenged his behavior. She reached into her bag, pulled out a bundle of letters. These are from 6 different women Edmund courted between 1815 and 1825. He saved them like trophies. I found them in his study after his first wife died. She knew, you see, knew what he was and hated him for it. Elena's hands shook as she took the letters. Love letters, all of them. Young women pouring out their hearts to a man who'd clearly encouraged them, then abandoned them. This is evidence, she said quietly. This is proof of systematic behavior spanning 3 decades, and I'm willing to testify to it publicly. Lady Beatrice met Elena's eyes. My nephew destroyed my daughter-in-law, broke her spirit so thoroughly that she barely spoke the last 5 years of her life. I won't let him do it to anyone else. Adrian was already moving to his desk. We need to get this to the parliamentary inquiry immediately. There's more. Lady Beatrice's voice hardened. Edmund has debts. Significant debts. He's been using marriage proposals as leverage, courting wealthy women just long enough to secure loans based on expected settlements, then abandoning them before actual marriage. The women suffer socially. He keeps the money. That's fraud, Victoria breathed. That's Edmund, and I can prove it. She pulled out more documents, financial records, loan agreements, a pattern of behavior that went far beyond simple cruelty into criminal territory. Elena looked at Adrian. This destroys him completely. Yes. His expression was grim satisfaction. It does. They spent the next 2 days organizing Lady Beatrice's evidence. The parliamentary inquiry escalated to a formal investigation. 4 major newspapers published follow-up articles detailing the financial fraud. Banks started calling in Edmund's loans. By the end of the week, Edmund Hartley had fled London. Rumors suggested Scotland, possibly France. No one knew for certain, and no one particularly cared. What mattered was that he was gone, ruined, exposed. Elena stood in Adrian's study, reading the final article. A scathing editorial calling for reform in how society handled accusations against powerful men. It quoted her article extensively, named her as the catalyst for change. How do you feel? Adrian asked. Elena considered. Like I should feel triumphant, or vindicated, or something large and dramatic. But you don't? I mostly feel tired, and sad for 20-year-old me who believed his lies. She set down the paper. But also relieved, like I can finally stop carrying shame that was never mine to begin with. He pulled her close. The Times is calling you a crusader for women's dignity. That's excessive. I just told the truth. The truth no one else was willing to tell. That's crusading whether you meant it or not. He kissed her forehead. You changed things, Elena. Society will never look at men like Edmund the same way again. She wanted to believe that, wanted to think the 11 women's stories had actually mattered. The evidence came 2 days later. A letter arrived from a young woman in Cornwall, barely 18, recently courted by a local lord who'd exhibited Edmund's pattern of behavior. She'd read Elena's article, recognized the warning signs, ended the courtship before it could destroy her. Then another letter, and another. Women writing to thank Elena for giving them language to describe their experiences, for making them believe they weren't crazy, or desperate, or uniquely flawed. By the end of the month, Elena had received 47 letters. 47 women who'd seen the pattern and protected themselves because someone had finally named it publicly. You saved them, Adrian said, watching her read through the correspondence. I just told my story. You told your story loudly enough that others could hear it and recognize their own. He smiled. That's not nothing, Elena. That's everything. The social consequences were mixed. Some circles still whispered about Elena, still questioned her motives. But others, slowly, grudgingly, began to acknowledge that maybe she'd been wronged, that maybe Edmund had been the problem all along. The real shift came at Lady Pemberton's annual ball, the first major social event since the scandal broke. Elena hadn't wanted to attend, but Adrian insisted, and Victoria had offered to accompany them as a show of solidarity. They arrived late, making an entrance. The whispers started immediately, but they were different now. Curious instead of cruel. Uncertain instead of condemning. Lady Pemberton herself greeted them at the entrance, a calculated move that signaled official acceptance. "Miss Whitford, Your Grace, Lady Victoria, how delightful!" She smiled warmly. "I must congratulate you, Miss Whitford. Your article was extraordinarily brave." Elena blinked. "Thank you. I've been hosting these gatherings for 40 years. I've watched countless young women destroyed by men like Edmund Hartley. You're the first who fought back successfully." She lowered her voice. "Between us, I never liked him. Smarmy little predator. I'm delighted he's ruined." With that pronouncement, she swept off to greet other guests. "Did that just happen?" Elena whispered. "That just happened." Adrian was grinning. "Lady Pemberton's endorsement means half of London will follow. You're officially respectable again." "I'm not sure I want to be respectable." "Too late. You're a crusader now. Respectability comes with the territory." They moved through the ballroom. People who'd cut Elena dead 2 weeks ago now nodded politely. A few brave souls even approached to offer congratulations. Victoria appeared at Elena's elbow, looking triumphant. "Mother just tried to speak to me. I told her I was busy and walked away. It felt amazing." "How's she taking your defection?" "Poorly, but she can't actually disown me without admitting why, which would require acknowledging the article. She's trapped." Victoria's smile was fierce. Turns out having leverage is rather fun. The evening progressed. Elena danced with Adrian, fielded questions from curious society matrons, and slowly realized that something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore. But she also wasn't the desperate scandal everyone had painted her as. She was Elena Whitford, the woman who'd exposed a predator, protected other women, and refused to back down when threatened. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was hers. They were preparing to leave when a young woman approached. Barely 20, beautiful in the effortless way youth provided, clearly nervous. "Miss Whitford, I'm Lady Caroline Ashton. I read your article. I'm glad it reached you. It saved me." Caroline's voice shook. "There was a man, Lord Westbrook. He'd been courting me very privately, promising marriage. But after reading your article, I recognized the pattern. The private attention, the grand promises, the secrecy. I ended things immediately." Elena's chest tightened. "I'm so glad." "My mother was furious. She said I'd ruined my chances with a good match. But then Lady Pemberton told her what you'd exposed about Lord Hartley, and—" Caroline smiled tremulously. "Mother apologized, said I'd shown good judgment. It's the first time she's ever said that to me." She curtsied and disappeared back into the crowd before Elena could respond. Adrian's hand found Elena's. 48. "What?" "That's 48 women you've saved. The letters plus her." Elena couldn't speak, just gripped his hand and tried not to cry in the middle of Lady Pemberton's ballroom. They left shortly after. The carriage ride back to Blackthorn House was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked finally. "That 3 weeks ago, I was invisible, safe, alone. And now I'm this." She gestured vaguely at herself. "Whatever this is. You're exactly who you were always meant to be. Society just finally caught up." "Adrian, I'm serious. You were never meant to hide, Elena. You were meant to fight, to challenge things, to make people uncomfortable with their comfortable cruelties." He pulled her close. "I'm proud of you. Prouder than I've ever been of anyone." The words undid something in her chest. She kissed him, messy and emotional and entirely improper for a moving carriage. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she managed, "I love you. I know I said it before, but I need you to understand. I actually love you. Not gratefully or strategically or because you defended me. I just love you." His smile was sunrise. "I know. I've known since you called Lady Catherine's daughter uninteresting to her face." That's a strange moment to fall in love. "That's the moment I knew you'd stopped hiding, and the real you is extraordinary." They arrived home to find the entrance hall full of flowers. Dozens of arrangements, all from women who'd read the article. The cards were brief but heartfelt. "Thank you, you're brave, you saved my daughter. You gave me words for what happened to me." Elena stood in the middle of them, overwhelmed. "This is too much," she whispered. "This is exactly right." Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You did something important, Elena. Let yourself feel it." She let herself feel it. The gratitude, the impact, the strange and terrifying weight of mattering. That night, they made love slowly, carefully, like they had all the time in the world. Afterward, Elena lay in Adrian's arms and marveled at how completely her life had changed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we keep going, together." He kissed her hair. "Though there is one thing I've been meaning to ask you." "What?" "Marry me." Elena went very still. "What?" "Marry me. Officially, publicly, permanently." He shifted so he could see her face. "I know it's fast. I know society will say I'm rushing you or you're trapping me or some other ridiculous thing, but I don't care. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to fight battles with you and argue about agricultural policy and build something real that outlasts both of us." Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "Adrian, you don't have to answer now. Take time. Think about it. But know that I'm asking, seriously, completely, irrevocably asking." Elena looked at him. This impossible man who'd seen her when she was invisible, defended her when she was attacked, loved her when she'd forgotten how to be loved. She thought about safety, about the careful life she'd built in shadows. Then she thought about the last 3 weeks, about standing in ballrooms and fighting back and mattering. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes?" "Yes. I'll marry you. I'm probably insane, and this is definitely too fast, and society will have 17 separate scandals about it, but yes." His kiss was answer enough. They announced the engagement 2 days later. The scandal was immediate and enormous, exactly as predicted. But underneath the gossip, something else was happening. Other voices were joining the conversation. Women who'd seen Elena's article, who'd watched her fight back, who recognized that maybe, just maybe, the rules were changing. Lady Pemberton hosted a dinner in their honor. Victoria helped plan it, using her society connections to ensure the right people attended. Margaret and Sarah came, along with 4 other women from the article. Lady Beatrice made a rare public appearance, lending her considerable social weight to the occasion. The dinner was remarkable. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't. Some guests were clearly uncomfortable, unsure how to navigate this new social landscape where women's stories actually mattered. But it was real, honest, a gathering of people who decided that truth was more important than comfortable lies. Toward the end of the evening, Lady Pemberton stood to make a toast. "To Miss Whitford and His Grace. May their union be blessed with the courage they've already shown individually." She paused, let her gaze sweep the room. "And to all the women here tonight who've survived what they shouldn't have had to survive. May we build a world where survival isn't necessary, where young women are protected instead of blamed, believed instead of dismissed." Glasses raised. Voices murmured agreement. Elena looked around the table, at women who'd been destroyed and rebuilt themselves, at Adrian whose certainty had never wavered, at Victoria who'd chosen truth over comfort. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined at 20, wasn't the safe, invisible life she'd built at 40. It was better. Messier, more complicated, infinitely more vulnerable, but real, deeply, terrifyingly real. And for the first time in 23 years, Elena wasn't afraid of being seen. She was just beginning to understand what she could build in the light. The wedding was set for October, 6 weeks away. Too fast by society's standards, but Adrian had pointed out that they'd already violated every other social convention, so why stop now? Elena spent the intervening weeks in a strange state of suspended reality. Half of London treated her like a curiosity, the aging spinster who'd somehow trapped a duke. The other half treated her like something approaching a hero. She hated both equally. What she didn't hate was the work. Adrian had made good on his original offer. She was now officially his senior strategic consultant with proper contracts and ridiculous compensation. They spent mornings reviewing estate reports, afternoons arguing about investment strategies, and evenings pretending they were going to maintain separate bedrooms before inevitably ending up tangled together. It was the most functional relationship she'd ever had, which of course meant something had to go catastrophically wrong. The letter arrived 3 weeks before the wedding, not addressed to her, to Adrian. From the Parliamentary Inquiry Committee. Elena found him in his study, reading it with an expression she had never seen before. Not anger. Something colder. "What is it?" He handed her the letter without comment. She read it twice, certain she must be misunderstanding. The committee had concluded their investigation into Edmund Hartley. They'd reviewed all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, examined financial records. Their findings were clear. Edmund had engaged in systematic fraud and emotional manipulation spanning 3 decades, but they weren't going to prosecute. The reasoning was laid out in careful legal language that boiled down to the crimes were too old, the victims too scattered, the evidence too dependent on he said, she said, testimony that courts historically didn't trust from women. They were calling it a regrettable pattern of ungentlemanly behavior and closing the investigation. Elena set down the letter carefully, because throwing it felt too much like giving them the satisfaction of seeing her break. They're letting him walk away, she said. They're protecting their own. Edmund has connections in Parliament, family ties to 3 committee members. They were never going to actually hold him accountable. Adrian's voice was flat, dangerous. I'm sorry. I thought we had enough evidence to force their hand. We did have enough evidence. They just decided it didn't matter. Elena, no. Let me be angry. She paced to the window, stared out at London's grey sky. 11 women told their stories. We had financial proof of fraud. We had his own aunt's testimony, and they've decided it's just ungentlemanly behavior. Adrian moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. We exposed him publicly, ruined his reputation, destroyed his finances. He'll never hurt anyone again. But he won't face consequences. He'll just disappear to France or Scotland and live quietly on whatever money he managed to hide. That's not justice. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. They stood there, watching rain start to fall, and Elena felt something she'd been suppressing for weeks finally crack open. I thought telling the truth would matter, she whispered. I thought if we just presented the evidence clearly enough, if we made them see the pattern, truth matters, it just doesn't always win immediately. That's a depressing philosophy. It's a realistic one. He turned her to face him. You saved 48 women, Elena. Probably more we don't know about. You changed how society talks about men like Edmund. That matters, even if the parliamentary committee are cowards. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think the exposure had been enough. But it felt hollow, incomplete, like they'd fought so hard just to watch the system protect exactly the people it was designed to protect. The knock on the door interrupted her spiral. Victoria entered, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. I'm sorry to intrude, but there's someone here to see both of you. She says it's urgent. Who? Lady Margaret Hartley, Edmund's wife. Elena's breath caught. Edmund's current wife, the woman he'd married after abandoning Elena all those years ago. The one Lady Beatrice said he'd broken so thoroughly she barely spoke the last years of her life, except Lady Beatrice had said she was dead. Send her in, Adrian said. The woman who entered was perhaps 50, elegant despite obvious exhaustion. She carried herself with the careful posture of someone who'd learned to make herself small. Your Grace, Miss Whitford, thank you for seeing me. Her voice was soft but steady. I'm Margaret Hartley, Edmund's wife, or rather, his widow as of yesterday. The room went silent. Edmund's dead? Elena managed finally. Killed himself. In Edinburgh. Left a note blaming everyone but himself. The parliamentary inquiry, the newspapers, his aunt, me. You, especially, Miss Whitford. Margaret's expression was complicated. I thought you should know before the papers print it, and I thought you should know the truth about what kind of man he really was. She pulled out a leather journal, set it on Adrian's desk like a weapon. I found this in his study after he died. It's his personal accounts of every woman he courted and discarded over 30 years. Names, details, methods he used. He wrote about it like a game he was winning. Her voice shook slightly. There are 43 women listed. You were number 7, Miss Whitford. Elena stared at the journal, couldn't make herself reach for it. Why are you showing us this? Adrian asked carefully. Because the parliamentary committee is going to try to bury it. They've already contacted me, suggesting I destroy any sensitive personal effects to preserve Edmund's reputation and spare the families involved. Margaret's smile was bitter. But I'm tired of protecting him. I spent 23 years married to a man who collected broken hearts like trophies. Who made me feel worthless while publicly playing the devoted husband. She pushed the journal toward Elena. This is evidence of systematic predation. Real evidence, dates, methods. Even his own assessment of which lies worked best on which types of women. With this, you could force the committee to reopen the investigation. Elena picked up the journal with shaking hands, opened it randomly. Miss Catherine Winters, 1821. Father's a vicar. Religious guilt plays beautifully. Told her I was looking for a wife who valued faith over status. She believed it completely. 3 weeks of private courtship before I moved to Lady Jane instead. Catherine left for her family's country estate the next month. Perfect execution. Her stomach turned. This wasn't remorse. This was strategy, calculation. He documented his cruelty like a scientist recording experiments. There are 43 entries like this? She asked. 43 over 30 years, some I recognized. Women who'd left London suddenly, or married badly in desperation, or just disappeared. Others I never knew about. Margaret's composure finally cracked. I was going to be number 16, but my father had money and connections, so Edmund actually married me instead of just discarding me. It didn't make me special. It just made me trapped. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly, for what you endured. Don't be. I survived, and now I'm making sure his cruelty serves a purpose. Margaret straightened. Take the journal. Use it. Force the committee to acknowledge what he was, and make sure every woman he destroyed knows it wasn't their fault. Adrian was already moving to his desk, drafting correspondence. I'll have this delivered to the committee chairman personally, along with a very clear message about what happens if they try to bury it. They'll argue it's private writings, not admissible evidence, Margaret started. They can argue whatever they want. I'm publishing it. He looked up. With your permission, Lady Hartley, every entry, every name, let society see exactly what they protected for 3 decades. Margaret's smile was fierce. Publish it. Burn his reputation to ashes. It's the only thing he actually cared about. The journal was published 4 days later, serialized across 3 major newspapers. The reaction was explosive. Families who'd spent years wondering why their daughters had suddenly left London finally had answers. Women who'd blamed themselves for being too naive, too trusting, too foolish, discovered they'd been targeted specifically because of those qualities. The parliamentary committee tried to dismiss it. Private writings, unreliable narrator, shouldn't speak ill of the dead. But the evidence was too detailed, too consistent with known facts, and the public outcry was too loud to ignore. Within a week, the committee announced they were issuing a formal report acknowledging systematic predatory behavior by Lord Edmund Hartley. They stopped short of calling it criminal, but they couldn't deny the pattern anymore. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't real justice. But it was something. Elena stood in Adrian's study, reading the committee's final report, and felt the weight of 23 years finally lift. He's gone, she said. Actually gone. And everyone knows what he was. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. How do you feel? Relieved. Angry it took his death to get acknowledgement. Sad for all the women whose lives he destroyed. She leaned back against him. Mostly just tired. I'm so tired of fighting. Then stop fighting. Marry me instead. She laughed despite everything. That's 3 weeks away. I haven't stopped fighting long enough to actually plan a wedding. Good thing Victoria's been doing it for you. It was true. Victoria had taken over wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent their entire life preparing for society events, and now finally had one worth celebrating. She'd handled everything from flowers to guest lists to navigating the complicated social politics of who could attend without causing another scandal. The wedding was scheduled for late October at Blackthorn House. Small by ducal standards, only 200 guests, but still larger than anything Elena had ever imagined for herself. The week before the ceremony, she received a letter from Sarah Thornton. Dear Miss Whitford, I wanted you to know that I'm engaged. To a gentleman who courted me openly, met my family properly, and never once made me feel like I should be grateful for his attention. A year ago, I would have settled for anyone who showed interest, would have ignored warning signs because I thought being chosen was more important than being respected. Your article taught me the difference. And now I'm marrying someone who actually sees me as an equal. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. You saved more than you know. With gratitude, Sarah. Elena read it 3 times, then added it to the growing pile of similar letters. 73 now. 73 women whose lives had changed because she'd refused to stay silent. The night before the wedding, she couldn't sleep. Too many emotions fighting for space: excitement, terror, disbelief that this was actually happening. She found Adrian in his study, reviewing contracts like it was any other night. "You're supposed to be resting," she said from the doorway. "You're supposed to be sleeping." Couldn't. Too much thinking. He set down his papers, pulled her into his lap. "What are you thinking about?" "That tomorrow I'm marrying a duke. That 6 months ago I was invisible and resigned to dying alone. That this is either the best decision I've ever made or the most catastrophic." "Definitely catastrophic," he said solemnly. "I'm very difficult to live with. You reorganize my ledgers without permission. You argue with my investment strategies. You critique my agricultural methods. You called my parliamentary colleagues boring to their faces at dinner last week." She laughed. "They were boring, and I was right about the crop rotation issue." "You were. You're usually right, which is deeply annoying." He kissed her softly. "Are you having second thoughts?" Elena considered. "No, just first thoughts very loudly. I've spent so long being careful, being invisible, protecting myself. And now I'm about to stand in front of 200 people and be extremely, undeniably visible. We could elope or run away to Scotland right now. Victoria would murder us both. She's been planning this for weeks." "True. She's frightening when she's organized." His arms tightened. "But seriously, if this is too much..." "It's not too much. It's just different, big, permanent." She met his eyes. "I love you. I want to marry you. I'm just also terrified because the last time I let myself want something this much, it destroyed me. I'm not Edmund Hartley. I know, you're nothing like him. You're honest and direct, and you've never once made me feel like I should be grateful for your attention." She touched his face. "You make me feel worthy. That's terrifying in its own way." "Why terrifying?" "Because if you're right, if I actually am worthy of this, then I wasted 23 years believing I wasn't, and I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive myself for that." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You survived the best way you knew how, with the information you had at the time. That's not weakness, Elena. That's just being human. I could have fought back earlier. You fought back when you were ready, when you had the strength and support and circumstances that made it possible." He tilted her face up. "Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Just be here now. With me. That's all I'm asking." She kissed him, grateful and desperate and absolutely certain. "Okay," she whispered. "I can do that." The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Elena woke in her own room. Victoria had insisted on maintaining at least that one tradition, and spent the morning being fussed over by Mrs. Cathcart and 3 ladies' maids Victoria had hired. The dress was emerald silk, because Adrian had been right. It did suit her better than anything else. Simple by society standards, but beautifully made, designed to fit her actual body instead of whatever ideal shape younger women achieved. She looked in the mirror and saw herself. Not who she'd been at 20, not who she'd forced herself to become at 40. Just herself. Gray hair swept up elegantly, lines around her eyes visible, looking exactly her age and somehow okay with it. "You're beautiful, miss," Mrs. Cathcart said quietly. "I'm 43. "You're beautiful," she repeated firmly. "And it's about time you believed it." The ceremony was held in Blackthorn House's ballroom, which Victoria had transformed into something approaching magical. White flowers everywhere, candlelight catching on crystal, 200 guests who'd come to witness what half of London still considered impossible. Elena walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no pretense that anyone owned her except herself. Adrian waited at the front, looking devastatingly handsome in formal blacks, his expression equal parts nerves and certainty. The ceremony was traditional, boring, necessary. Elena barely heard it. She was too busy looking at Adrian, at the life they were about to build, at the impossible fact that this was actually happening. When the officiant asked if she took Adrian as her husband, she said yes, clearly enough that it carried to the back of the room. When he asked Adrian the same question, Adrian said, absolutely, with such conviction that several guests laughed. And then they were married. Officially, publicly, permanently. The reception was chaos in the best possible way. Guests who'd come out of curiosity stayed because they were actually enjoying themselves. Victoria had seated the tables brilliantly, mixing old society with new, ensuring conversation stayed interesting without becoming volatile. Elena danced with Adrian, accepted congratulations from people she'd never met, and tried to process that this was her life now. Halfway through the evening, Lady Pemberton found her. "Well done, my dear. You've pulled off what I thought was impossible." "What's that?" Making the Duke of Blackthorn smile like a besotted fool. "I've known him 20 years, never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." She patted Elena's hand. "But more importantly, you've changed things. Society's talking about predatory behavior now, questioning men's stories instead of automatically believing them. That's your doing. It was a lot of women's doing. It was your courage that started it. Don't diminish that." Lady Pemberton smiled. "I'm 72 years old. I've watched society protect terrible men my entire life. What you did, what you're still doing, matters. Remember that when the doubts creep in." She swept away before Elena could respond. The evening wore on. Guests gradually departed, leaving just close friends and family. Victoria cornered Elena near midnight. "So, how does it feel to be a duchess?" "Surreal. Terrifying. Like I'm waiting for someone to realize it's a mistake and take it back. No one's taking it back. Adrian would fight Parliament itself before letting you go." Victoria's expression softened. "You know, 6 months ago I would have been furious about this wedding, about you taking what I thought I deserved. But watching you two together, the way you actually talk to each other, challenge each other, build something real, I'm starting to understand what partnership actually looks like." "You'll find it too," Elena said. "Someone who sees you for more than just your family connections and perfect manners." "Maybe. For now I'm enjoying being useful instead of decorative." She smiled. "And planning very excellent weddings. This one turned out rather well, I think." "It's perfect. It's close. The flower arrangements could have been better positioned for optimal viewing angles." Elena hugged her, cutting off the analysis. "Thank you for everything." Victoria hugged back awkwardly, clearly unused to genuine affection. "You're welcome. Now go find your husband. He's been watching you for the last 10 minutes, like you might disappear." Adrian was indeed watching her from across the room, expression soft. She crossed to him, slipped her hand into his. "Ready to escape?" "I've been ready for hours. But Victoria would kill me if we left before she declared the event officially concluded. I think we can sneak away now. Most guests have left." They made it to the door before Victoria's voice rang out. "Oh, no, you don't. You haven't cut the cake yet." Adrian groaned. "She's terrifying." "She's efficient. There's a difference." They cut the cake. Another Victoria-mandated tradition, posed for final photographs. Accepted last congratulations. Finally, blessedly, they escaped to Adrian's private rooms. Their rooms now. The thought still felt strange. "Alone at last," Adrian said, pulling her close. "Your family is still downstairs. They can see themselves out. I'm done sharing you with society." He kissed her thoroughly. "How are you, actually?" Elena considered. "Exhausted, relieved, happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible." She smiled. "Terrified that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and discover this was all an elaborate dream." "If it's a dream, we're both having it." He started unfastening her dress with practiced ease, which means it's either very real or we're both delusional. Could be both. Definitely both. The dress pooled at her feet. "I love you, Elena. Just in case that wasn't clear from the whole marrying you in front of 200 people thing." It was moderately clear, but repetition doesn't hurt. They made love slowly, carefully, taking their time. Afterward, Elena lay in Adrian's arms and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That 6 months ago, I was managing a failing estate and convinced I'd die alone. Now I'm a duchess married to a man who actually loves me, and apparently I'm some kind of accidental social reformer." She laughed. "It's absurd. It's perfect. It's messy. We still have enemies. Society still gossips. Edmund's dead, but his legacy remains. The parliamentary committee gave us a report, but not real justice." "Elena," he tilted her face toward his. "Stop cataloging problems and just be here. Right now. With me." She took a breath. Let herself settle into the moment. Adrian's arms around her, dawn light starting to creep through the windows. The impossible reality of being chosen and loved and allowed to exist fully. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm here." Good, because I have plans for you. Scandalous plans. Strategic plans. I want you to take over the Scottish estates. Full management authority. They're a disaster, and you're brilliant at fixing disasters. Elena sat up, interested despite herself. What kind of disaster? The fascinating kind. Tenant disputes, outdated agricultural methods, a steward who's been embezzling for years. You're offering me a management nightmare as a wedding gift? I'm offering you a challenge that will actually use your talents instead of wasting them on being decorative. He grinned. Though you are extremely decorative. She smacked his arm. I'm 43. You're brilliant and beautiful, and mine, and I'm fully utilizing all three facts. This is the strangest marriage proposal. We're already married. This is a job offer. You can't just hire your wife to manage estates. Why not? You're the most qualified person I know. The fact that we're married is incidental. Elena considered. Managing the Scottish estates would be challenging, consuming, exactly the kind of work she'd been doing at Whitford, but on a much larger scale. It was also the opposite of what duchesses typically did. Society will be scandalized, she pointed out. Society's been scandalized since I started courting you. Might as well give them something new to gossip about. When do I start? His smile was triumph and love mixed together. Whenever you want. The estates aren't going anywhere. They spent the next hour discussing crop rotations and tenant management and investment strategies, because apparently that's what they did even on their wedding night. It was perfect. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Elena divided her time between London and Adrian's Scottish holdings, transforming failing systems into profitable ones. Adrian continued his parliamentary work and business ventures, consulting her on everything from trade policy to investment decisions. They fought regularly. About methods, about priorities, about whether Shakespeare was actually worth reading. They made up just as regularly. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the fairy tale ending 20-year-old Elena had imagined. It was better. 3 months after the wedding, Elena received a letter from Catherine Winters, entry number 6 in Edmund's journal. The woman had disappeared in 1821, and Elena had assumed she was dead or too traumatized to contact. The letter was brief. Miss Whitford. I saw the journal entries published, saw my name, my story, documented like an experiment. For 30 years I believed I was broken, that my faith had been weak, my judgment poor, my love unworthy. Seeing it written down, seeing that he planned it, calculated it, chose me specifically because of qualities he could exploit, it released something I've been carrying since I was 19. It wasn't my fault. Thank you for fighting back, for showing all of us we weren't broken, just targeted. I'm 73 now. I thought I'd die carrying that shame. Instead, I'm finally free of it. With gratitude, Catherine Elena read the letter to Adrian that evening. Her voice cracked halfway through. 73 years old, she said. She carried that shame for 54 years because Edmund made her believe she was worthless. But she's free of it now because you fought back. We fought back, all of us together. You started it. He pulled her close. You were the first one brave enough to name what happened, to refuse to be invisible. Everything else followed from that. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the women who'd contributed, all the ways it had been collective effort. But he was also right. She had been the first to stand up publicly, to refuse the shame society tried to assign her. That had mattered, still mattered. 6 months after the wedding, Parliament passed new legislation regarding fraud and emotional manipulation in courtship. It wasn't perfect, still relied heavily on women's testimony being believed, but it was something, a formal acknowledgement that predatory behavior had legal consequences. The newspapers credited Elena with the change. She tried to deflect, to spread credit to all the women who'd shared their stories. But Victoria pointed out, "You're a duchess now. Your voice carries weight. Use it." So she did. She started speaking publicly about her experiences. Not just Edmund, but the broader pattern of how society treated women who'd been victimized. She advocated for better legal protections, for education that taught young women to recognize manipulation, for systems that believed victims instead of automatically defending powerful men. It was terrifying. It had made her a target for criticism and mockery. It also changed things. Slowly, gradually, the conversation shifted. Women started questioning narratives that had always seemed inevitable. Men started being held accountable for behavior that had previously been dismissed as ungentlemanly. It wasn't revolution, just evolution. But it was real. On their first anniversary, Adrian took Elena back to Whitford Manor. They'd maintained the estate but rarely visited, too busy with Scottish holdings and London politics and everything else they'd built together. Walking through the familiar halls felt strange, like visiting a museum of her former life. "I was so lonely here," she said, standing in the library where she'd spent countless hours with ledgers and loneliness. "I convinced myself I was content, that safety and solitude were enough." Was it enough? No, but I didn't know any different. She turned to face him. "You gave me different, showed me what it felt like to be seen and chosen and fought for. You gave yourself different, I just provided the opportunity." They made love in her old bedroom, the room where she'd read Adrian's first letter and thought he was insane for pursuing her, where she'd packed for London convinced she was making a catastrophic mistake, where she'd been so carefully, determinedly invisible. "I'm glad we're here," she said afterward, wrapped in Adrian's arms. "It's good to remember who I was, so I can appreciate who I've become." "Who have you become?" Elena considered. "Someone visible, someone who fights back, someone who believes she deserves to take up space in the world." She smiled. "Someone who occasionally still can't believe she married a duke." "Believe it, you're stuck with me now. Worst decision I ever made. Absolutely catastrophic." They returned to London the next day, to work that mattered and causes worth fighting for in a marriage that was messy and real and nothing like either of them had expected. 2 years after the wedding, Elena published her own book, a memoir documenting her experiences with Edmund and the broader patterns of predatory behavior she'd uncovered. It was honest, uncomfortable, refusing to soften the difficult parts. It became a bestseller. Not because it was scandalous, though society certainly found it shocking, but because women recognized their own experiences in her words, saw their own shame and survival reflected back without judgment. The book tour was exhausting. Elena spoke in ballrooms and drawing rooms and universities, answering the same questions over and over. How did you find the courage to fight back? What advice would you give young women? Do you regret staying silent for so long? Her answers evolved over time, but the core remained consistent. "I found courage by refusing to accept shame that was never mine to carry. My advice is to trust yourself when something feels wrong. And no, I don't regret the past. I survived it the best way I could. All I can control is what I do now." By the 3rd year of their marriage, Elena had transformed from invisible spinster to one of London's most influential advocates for women's rights. She managed 4 estates, consulted on investment strategies, and somehow found time to mentor young women navigating society's treacherous waters. Adrian supported all of it, financially, emotionally, practically. He used his parliamentary connections to advance legislation she supported. He defended her publicly when critics attacked. He reminded her to eat when she got too absorbed in work. "You're using me for my political connections," he complained one evening, watching her draft another proposal for legal reform. "Obviously, why else would I marry you? My devastating good looks? Those help, but mostly the connections." She kissed him. "And possibly because I love you, though that's secondary to the political advantages." He pulled her into his lap, scattering her papers. "I'm deeply offended." "You'll survive." She wound her arms around his neck. "We both will. We're good at surviving. We're better at living." It was true. They'd built something that went beyond mere survival, a partnership that challenged both of them, a marriage that made space for ambition and argument and absolute certainty in each other. The 5th anniversary found them in Scotland, reviewing the estates Elena had completely transformed. Profitable now, with happy tenants and modern methods, and none of the disasters that had existed when she'd started. They stood on a hill overlooking fields she'd redesigned, watching sunset paint everything gold. "I was 43 when we met," Elena said. "Society had written me off. I'd written myself off, convinced I was too old for anything except quiet management of a failing estate. And now I'm 48, managing 4 estates, advocating for legal reform, married to an impossible man who somehow loves me exactly as I am." She leaned against him. "I wasted 23 years being invisible, but these last 5, these have been real." Only 5 years? Adrian turned her to face him. We have decades left. What are we going to do with them? Elena thought about all the work still undone, laws still needing reform, women still needing voices, systems still protecting powerful men at vulnerable women's expense. Change things, she said. Keep fighting. Keep refusing to be invisible or quiet or appropriately grateful. She smiled. And occasionally take breaks to argue with you about agricultural methods. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I know. I'm very romantic. They kissed as the sun set over Scottish hills Elena had made profitable through competence and determination. Somewhere in London, young women were reading Elena's book and learning they didn't have to accept shame for other people's cruelty. Somewhere in Parliament, Adrian's colleagues were debating legislation Elena had drafted, giving her ideas weight they would have dismissed from a nameless spinster 5 years ago. Somewhere in drawing rooms across England, society was slowly, grudgingly accepting that maybe, the rules they'd built to protect powerful men weren't actually serving anyone except those men. It wasn't perfect. Progress never was. But it was real, tangible, the kind of change that outlasted any one person's story. Elena Whitford, now the Duchess of Blackthorn, though she still thought of herself simply as Elena, had stopped being invisible, had stopped apologizing for taking up space, had stopped letting other people's judgment define her worth. She'd become exactly what she'd always had the capacity to be: brilliant, difficult, occasionally terrifying, absolutely unwilling to settle for less than she deserved. And she'd proven that in the harshest social battlegrounds, intelligence, courage, and emotional strength weren't just survival tools. They were weapons that could reshape the world. Ready to go home? Adrian asked as darkness fell. Elena looked at him. This man who'd seen her when she was invisible, loved her when she'd forgotten how to love herself, fought beside her when she'd needed an ally, and given her space when she'd needed to fight alone. Yes, she said, let's go home. They walked down the hill together, hand in hand, toward a future neither of them had planned but both had chosen. Behind them, the estate flourished. The work continued. The women they'd helped built their own lives, free from shame they'd never deserved. And Elena, 48, powerful, no longer forgotten, stepped into the rest of her life with absolute certainty that she'd earned every moment of it. Not through being perfect, through being brave enough to stop hiding. That, in the end, was the only legacy that mattered.